our elder Comrade Hassan Sunmonu. This is one of two events. On January 7th, he will be launching his major book in Abuja. And these two events will be cumulated in terms of understanding him. Recently, he was honored by his alma mater with the creation of a center named after him, which is a form of a permanent legacy in his honor. To the younger people meeting him for his first time, he's a renowned trade unionist with over 6 decades of service to the labor movement at various levels: the national, the regional, the continental, and international. He was born on the 7th of January, which is the day he's also launching his book, so as a birthday event, in 1941 in Oshogbo, where he lives with his brother and family, and was trained as a civil engineer at Yaba Technical Institute, now Yaba College of Technology, and now Yaba University of Technology. And he went to Italy to earn his postgraduate diploma in highway engineering. He started his professional career at the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, contributing to the major projects such as the National Arts Theatre in Lagos. His leadership qualities were evident early through active student unionism and later through prominent roles in trade unions. In 1978, he became the founding president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, and he served for 2 terms until 1984. During his time as president, he strengthened workers' rights. He secured the declaration of May Day as a public holiday, and he championed the national minimum wage. As his activities expanded to the continental level, his colleagues now call him Comrade Sunmonu, served as Secretary General of the Organization of African Trade Union Unity from 1986 to 2012, where he was re-elected 6 times. He played a key role in opposing IMF World Bank structural adjustment programs, advocating African economic integration, and establishing the Kwame Nkrumah African Labour College. He also represented African labor at major international platforms, including the ILO and the African Union. His contributions have earned him numerous honors: Order of the Niger, honorary doctorates, international knighthood, and is a polyglot and regarded as one of the continent's most influential labor leaders. Please join me in welcoming Comrade Hassan Sunmonu. We have a distinguished guest of scholars and activists to interview him. And let me introduce the members of our panel, starting with Professor Idowu Olayinka, who earned his BSc in Geology from the University of Ibadan in 1981, his Master's in Geophysics from Imperial College of Science, Technology and Medicine in 1984. He received the Overseas Research Students Award from the Committee of Vice Chancellors and Principals of United Kingdom Universities for his PhD in geophysics at the University of Birmingham in 1988. He had postdoctoral experience at Technical University in Germany, and he was also a fellow visiting scholar at Technical University Berlin and Alexander Vogt Humboldt Research Fellow between 1997 and 1999. He has been a member of the faculty, University of Ibadan, for 35 years, and the last 24 years as a full professor. He has received significant accolades during his professional career, including being a fellow of many professional and learned societies. He served Ibadan diligently, innovatively, including being the Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Dean, Head of Department, Chairman, Senate Curriculum Committee, Chairman, Board of Directors of the African Research Universities, and a member of the Council of Association of Common Universities in London. He was the Director of University of Ibadan Microfinance Bank, member of Council Association of Commonwealth Universities, Chairman of the Board of Directors, African Research Universities Alliance, Pro-Chancellor and Chairman of Council, West Midlands Open University in Lagos, Chairman of the Board of Directors, Multiverse Mining and Exploration. Next is Ms. Sikuraibe, a development advocate, freelance journalist with a passion for social justice and gender equity. Her activism interrogates power structures. She examines how environmental challenges, shrinking civic space, gaps in public services affect the realization of human rights. It's conducted action-driven research. It's mobilized the grassroots in organizing. It's an activist in public policy, media advocacy. Our bylines have appeared on various platforms, including International Politics and Society, Women's Media Center, World Politics Review, Brave New Europe, Institute of Development Studies, among other reputable publications. She has served as the Assistant Executive Director at Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa. Our next panelist, Achike Chude, is the National Secretary of the Nigerian Union of Journalists. He graduated from the University of Port Harcourt with a BA, and he went to the University of Lagos to receive his Master's in International Law and Diplomacy. He's a notable human rights activist, change agent, associate member of the International Professional Managers Association, and a member of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. He's an influential media personality, writing on social issues, comments on political affairs, both at national and international level, and he has made numerous contributions to enhance the development of our society through his essays, both in national newspapers and electronic media. He wrote Sunset of Liberty and Siege, both of them are literary works, and the books are on the reading list, University of Port Harcourt and Obafemi Awolowo University. Today is the Deputy National Chairman of the Joint Action Front and a member of the Justice, Development and Peace Center. He's a member and head of the media team of Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room. He's observed elections in different election cycles and in different parts of the country. He's also in collaboration with Environmental Rights Action, Friends of the Earth, Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, Reclaim Nigeria, and several other people-oriented non-governmental organizations. With Lakemfa, last but not the least, is the president of the Society for International Relations Awareness, former acting general secretary of the NLC, as Secretary General of the Organization of African Trade Union, which is the Confederation of Labor Centers in Africa. I welcome all of you into this program. For those of you who are familiar with our program, we exist on various platforms. We use Zoom to transmit to various other platforms, radio stations and televisions. People have joined us from YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and it is only those who join by Zoom who can ask questions. We encourage participation. We thank our technical partners in all these various countries. We thank our staff, our consultants. We also thank the newspapers who have joined us. We have media representation from Tribune and Vanguard and Punch and Guardian. And on Tuesday, they release issues of interest to them on various platforms. The way we are going to proceed, we invite our panelists to make their opening remarks. After that, they will now begin to pose questions to our main guest, who is anchoring.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm speaking. Can you hear me? Okay.
We can hear you. This conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Let me start with my good friend, Toyin Falola, to make his opening statements. 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, Prof. And congratulations to Alhaji Sunmonu, who is my mentor in the trade union movement. The Nigerian trade labor movement has been responsible for the development of the consciousness of Nigerians. Under colonialism, Nigeria was divided into various organizations. But when the trade unions were founded, the centers were founded in 1973, I mean, in 1943, they teamed up with the students and the nationalists and established the first national political party in Nigeria. Also, it was in 1945, following general strike, that people became conscious that there was a country called Nigeria. And in that process, a sense of nationalism and patriotism developed. The trade unions were also instrumental to the rejection of Nigeria becoming a military base for the British. They also did not support the split of Nigeria during the Civil War. And after the Civil War, the labor leaders like Wahab Goodluck were detained by the military for demanding an end to military regime, to military rule in Nigeria. The labor unions, especially under Alhaji Sunmonu, had also built a strong civil society opposition to dictatorship, which finally led to the military departing the country, I mean the leadership, in 1979. Over the years, the trade unions have mobilized citizens And the way they have organized general strikes in Nigeria is not just about workers going on strike, it's about the entire populace going on strike. And so you had a number of those general strikes to the extent that the Obasanjo administration in 2004 accused the Nigeria Labour Congress of trying to take over government. However, with time, the effectiveness, efficacy, and the mobilization powers of NLC and the trade unions have diminished. It used to be the joke about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, that if a man and his wife quarreled at home, they came to report to the NLC. But now, even workers in many cases do not come to the NLC, which means that the trade unions and the labor movement need to reorganize and recover from the period, especially in the last 8-9 years. Now, today, Nigeria is split in a number of ways and sense, including on religious grounds, on political grounds, and we have serious insecurity by bandits and terrorists. But the labor movement remains one of the few organizations left in the country that brings people together, irrespective of their origins and political affiliation. So there's a need to rebuild the trade unions and the labor movement so that some force can hold the country together when its very existence is challenged. I want to thank Alhaji Sunmonu for the role he has played in building the trade union movement in Nigeria and in Africa and internationally. I am a beneficiary of that, and I actually succeeded Alhaji Sunmonu as the General Secretary of the Organization of African Trade Union Unity, UATU. I thank you for that, and I welcome everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for this introduction, bringing your experience. We'll return to one of the issues you posed. How do we rebuild? That is a significant issue. Let me turn to Ms. Sikora Ibe for our opening remarks. Sikora.
Thank you, Prof. And good evening to everyone. I'm very delighted to be at this meeting and conversation, and I consider it an honor to be speaking to Par Hassan. And that's because I've read about him. And as a young person, I also understand the role he played in this era. And this conversation is, to me, a legacy conversation because it's like a living archive. It's like a living archive of this very strong figure. So Par Hassan, or Comrade Hassan, as I would put it, organized at a period when the labor considered itself as a historical force, you know, as not as a pressure group, but as a very disciplined movement capable of bending power to do its bidding and to reshape the terms of governance. And I've read his history. He emerged from the student union and then down to the labor and trade union, and then even across the continent as a very towering figure. And all this organizing unfolded within a period where the military even held sway, but then the labor still spoke with moral authority and political confidence. And, you know, government listened because they had to listen, and it was non-negotiable. You know, the claims of labor were rooted in their unity, their numbers, the demands that they made. And that's why during this era, we had the workers' charters of demands in Nigeria. We had strong resistance to the IMF and the World Bank austerity programs. And there was the insistence that African development must serve African workers and must not be abstract ideas. Labor fought for what was right, what was workers' core needs, and even at great personal cost and in hostile political environments. But looking at what we have, today's contemporary world, as a young person, comparing the stories of yonder and the stories of now, much of what happened back then has changed, and the historical conditions and context, even if they remain the same, the organizing has changed rapidly. If you look at Nigeria and across Africa, more working people are poorer, the conditions are precarious, and we are exposed to violence even more than what it was decades ago. We have privatization, deregulation, and debts that have followed out public institutions. And even across places you would expect organizing in unity, like in the academic institutions, the student unions, trade unions, labor unions, there's so much fragmentation, and it would seem that the labor movement in recent times is even timid, sometimes reactive. They don't prepare for future happenings, and all the while governments are just invoking several reforms without consultations, without minding what could be the impact on populations. And then there's the aspect of young people also organizing on social media and the debate, ongoing debate, given the challenges that have brought the labor union in recent times. And people have had to take upon, people have had to go out in the streets by themselves, organize on social media, and then go out into the streets without the backing of the labor unions. And then people are now saying, what is the need? What do we need the labor union for? Do you think that there's still a role that the union plays in contemporary organizing? So there are so many questions that are important to me. And there's also the big one that I see that we emerged from the student union and onwards. But in recent times, there's a fragmentation. Even in our campuses, students are being victimized for speaking up. And there are just so many questions I'm interested in asking and understanding his perspective and what can be done today and how we can effect those changes and bring back the power that exists in our movements again. So I'm really grateful to be having this conversation. And I thank Comrade Hassan so much for obliging us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are going to return to your big issues, one of which is the labor union now irrelevant? That's a big point you've made. We're going to return to that. Let me now turn to Achike to make his opening remark. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Let me just say that I am very, very grateful and honored for the opportunity to be a part of this very important discussion honoring a legend, Alhaji Sunmonu. Of course, it would not have been possible without the Toyin Falola Foundation, who has also helped to put it together. I will say that the Alhaji Hassan Sunmonu has spent about 8 decades in this life. Let us even remove the first 2 decades of his life. That's about 20 years. And then now say that he has been in the public space for the past 6 decades. 60 years. 60 years is a very long time for a man to remain in the public space with his integrity intact and assured. And you see, when people talk about Hassan Sunmonu, it is always with a sense of pride. I mean, as a labor activist and a humanist and as a human being, it is always with a sense of pride that he has represented the working class in a sterling manner He has been consistent over the years. He is not a man that has been plagued with scandal, especially in a country where patronage has become the order of the day, where greed, pushes people into doing things that under normal circumstances or doing things that undermine their credibility. But for 6 decades, he has remained consistent and has remained loved by the organization that he gave his life to a very large extent. And I think that this is a very commendable thing. And so we want to also let him know, I want to let him know that we watched him for decades. Even some of us were very young, but even when we were in the university, we heard of him, we heard of his exploits, we heard of the things that he had done. And so I hope he's listening to this, because it's important, always important, to honor people while they are alive, to tell them that we appreciate the role and the positions that they have played in life, sometimes with a lot of under very serious conditions. We know that my intervention in this particular discussion would have to do with, the historical, sense of the labor unionism, what labor represented at a time that he came on board. Because by 1978, he had become Secretary General of WATU. Even before then, he had started playing, taking serious part in labor activism. And so I can imagine, one of the things that goes on in my mind is, what was his thinking? What was his sentiment? And not just his sentiment alone as regards Nigerian labor, but his sentiment in the African continent with regards to the vision that they had, for Africa. And after about 6 decades, in being involved in the politics of this country in labor-related matter, what are the sentiments that that he attaches himself to at this particular point in time? Is it that of disappointment? Is it that of despair? Is it that of anger? Is it that of hope? That all of the dreams that they had about 6 decades ago, have they actually been realized? Not just for him, but for Nigeria as a nation state and for the continent of Africa. Not just for him, but for his colleagues also, because he was not the only labor activist. We remember the role labor has played, and I think my colleagues have also talked about it, how they helped to build the consciousness of the youths, especially those of us that were in the university in those days. So if there were gains that were made at a particular point in time, gains, that saw a lot of us, a lot of the younger ones going out on the streets and the rest, we know that it is that labor played a very active role in shaping the consciousness of the average Nigerian student in those days. And a lot of us now came out from the university, and labor also provided an umbrella for some of us to also practice our trade even within the labor sector. Yes, we know that things are not exactly the same anymore. The dynamics have changed. The era is different. The political actors are not exactly what we used to have, in those days. But still, there still remains a challenge. How does labor, for instance, and that is the critical thing really, how does labor, play the kind of role that it should within the polity of this country, so that it can be able to influence much more the policies that are articulated from the government. And of course, that in the past few years, there have been a lot of discussions about labor being involved, in politics. If you look at the history of labor organizations, even when you talk about the United Kingdom and so many other parts of the world, we saw what the kind of incursion that labor made into politics in those countries. And so some of the social welfare schemes that you have today in places like the United Kingdom and the rest are as a result of the participation of labor in politics itself. But we see that in Africa here, especially in Nigeria, it is quite different. At every particular point in time, labor is blackmailed whenever labor wants to make an incursion into the politics of this country, even to make political statements, which has been the tradition of labor in this country. It is always seen, as partisan. And then the question you ask yourself is, the labor leadership, the working class in this country, are they not supposed to have views that border on the politics of their country? Because it is this politics of the country that determine ultimately the direction of labor. And so it becomes a challenge. And hopefully in the course of the discussion for this program, on this program, we'll be able to maybe trash out some of these things and then to get the perspective of the legend that we're celebrating today. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chud. Your issues are also connected with previous speakers in terms of how the grants have shifted, the changing dynamics, and what we should expect. Let me now move on to the former Vice Chancellor, Professor Olayinka, to make his opening remarks. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I'd like to thank Professor Falola for inviting me as one of the panelists at this program being put together to honor our worthy and eminent elder statesman, Dr. Hassan Sunmonu, as part of activities lined up to mark his 85th birthday. When I was very young, I never believed that people could live beyond 70 years. But now, Elder Hassan Sunmonu is 85. And we pray that in 15 years' time, he will celebrate his centenary. And he's still looking young, ill and healthy. So happy birthday, sir. And joining the other co-panelists, it's obvious that trade unions are put in place to improve the working conditions of the various unions that sign up to them. And it's really very exciting to note that our honoree this afternoon, at least from Nigeria, Elder Sunmonu was the person who fought for a minimum wage of maybe 180 naira or thereabout, which was probably a lot of money those days. And I think those other labor leaders who took over from him have also tried their best, and they are still trying their best to do things along those lines to improve the working conditions of the people. But I think maybe it's in the natural order of things. Those who employ labor, they tend to cheat those who work under them, whether deliberately or otherwise. And they also, as part of efforts to maintain job security, I think one refrain from labor leaders is always to the effect that injustice against one person is justice against all. So an individual staff in a company or in a university, for example, where I apply my trade, may not be able to fight for himself or herself. But if he or she is a member of an organized trade union, then the union will fight for him or her insofar as he pays the check-up bills, and to that extent is recognized as a member. And I think what trade union leaders we are using Elder Hassan Sunmonu as a point of contact to all the others. What they do is to push the scenario that, the narrative that rule of law is better than rule of a man. So we need they push a good governance at every turn. And I think it's really very important. And we know that in Nigeria, for example, the general impression, which may not be misplaced, is to the effect that the public schools at primary school level, at secondary school level, they have more or less collapsed because of the nonchalant attitude of government over the years, whether it was a military regime or now under the civilian dispensation. But the unions, whether it's Nigerian Union of Teachers, which I'm sure is an affiliate of the NLC, they've been trying their best. And coming to the university sector, where that I'm a bit familiar with, I think at the time the Academic Staff Union of Universities was banned, unbanned, but I think we've had a good deal. And from Professor Agbede, who was there around the 1977, 78, Professor Jega was there in the early 90s, with the current president, Professor Chris Piwuna of the University of Jos, who is the president of ASU. Of course, there are other staff unions in the universities apart from ASU, like the Senior Staff Union and the other NASU, NAT for the academic technologies. But I personally think that without ASU, for example, people label ASU that they're always going on strike. I mean, the strike is probably the last resort. And if we've not had those strikes in the university system, there wouldn't have, I mean, the public university system will have collapsed. And when you even think of it, if you go to any state university campus, you see most of the buildings there are supported by TED Fund. That's the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, formerly Education Trust Fund. So in fact, those state universities are, for all practical purposes, TED Fund universities. Because all the companies quoted on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, they have to pay a certain percentage of their profit. And that is the main source of fund for TED Fund. But the relevant point here is that it was ASU that fought for that, because people have always been complaining of a lack of funding. Most universities in the world will complain of lack of funding. So as part of the negotiation, then ASU now suggested that why don't you tax these companies and ask them to pay a certain percent, whether it's 2% or 3% of their profits, to fund these lofty programs. And I think government agreed with them. And so it's not always an adversary role. I mean, you say you don't have money to support us. Okay, why don't you look at this possibility? And you also have the famous 1992-93 Miscellaneous Provision Act, University Autonomy, as amended. I think that has gone a long way. An aspect of that is the appointment of Vice Chancellor. Because up to that time, the Council of University will do the adverts. I mean, they do search team, they interview the candidates. Then Council will then send 3 names to the visitor, who for federal universities is the president of the country. And there was even a particular case for one federal university, they sent 3 names to President Obasanjo. Obasanjo, he didn't even know any of them. So why would they have any case against any particular person? So it now becomes, I alluded to the issue of rule of man as against rule of law. So somebody came first, another one came second, another one came third. The law was that you send 3 names to the visitor or president of the country. You could pick number 1, you could pick number 2, you could pick number 3. They can even reject the entire list without giving any reason. So if the council has been appointed, well, of course, the pro-chancellor is an appointee of the visitor, why can you not trust their judgment? Say you guys go and do it. In fact, President Obasanjo said he didn't even know these people. Why are you asking him to make a choice between number 1, number 2, number 3? So what I'm trying to say, it was ASU that fought for that. To me, of course, the system is not foolproof, but it's still better than one person sitting in Aso Rock and deciding, just because people are between the university campus and Aso Rock, they have intercepted the recommendation and they change the whole scenario. Of course, the law will have covered them. They say pick either number 1, number 2, number 3. You can even reject that list. But now, as part of devolving power to the council, so council now will appoint one person. Remember that the pro-chancellor and chairman of council himself is an appointee of the president of the country. So if you don't have a good union in place, they wouldn't have been able to fight that. Of course, this one is only applicable to federal universities. Most of the state universities, they are not yet prepared to let go of their powers. So the system 3 names to the governor, who in this case is the visitor to the state university. But I think the idea of the council of the various federal universities appointing their own vice chancellor is something to be commended. Who is afraid of democracy? If council now said this is the person we have appointed, the law is that they then inform the visitor. So I think these are things that eminent people like our honorary Hassan Sunmonu and others in various sectors have been fighting for. Because without that, the university will have totally collapsed. Now, I think the honorable minister of education said they are going to sign some agreement with ASU maybe during the first half of this month. And to me, I've been in the university system for the better part of my adult life. And I think if it's not because of ASU that has been fighting for us, the whole system will have collapsed. Like I said earlier, the public primary and public secondary education system in Nigeria have collapsed. So the public university system too will have collapsed, but for the intervention of ASU. I've been taking inspiration from our eminent Hassan Sunmonu. Those are just my preliminary remarks. Thank you, the coordinator.
Thank you. Before we turn to the Alhaji, our leader, I want to ask all the members of the panel 2 questions. They can answer it in turn. I won't call on anyone. Is Nigeria worth dying for or fighting for? Anyone?
Well, thank you, sir. Abi, to me, I think wherever you are born is your home. Since we don't have any other country, so I think Nigeria is worth dying for. This was where I was born, and I thank God I wouldn't have been happier much happier in another place, in spite of the challenges. So I think Nigeria is worth living for and also dying for. Thank you, sir.
Any other member of the panel, would you want to fight and
Thank
die
you.
for Nigeria? And why?
Thank you. Sorry.
Go
Okay,
ahead.
I think okay, thank you so much, Prof. This
Please
was a
go ahead.
question that.
Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, I think
Yes,
this is very
you.
interesting. This is very interesting because incidentally, this is one of the questions that I intended to ask the legendary Pa, if Nigeria is worth dying for. But then I think it depends on one's convictions and the roadmap that offers to that person, and also what lessons in history a person can hold on or cling to say that Nigeria is worth dying for. I mean, given the contemporary realities, I think that's a very contested question, and the answers might be conflicted.
What is your answer?
Okay, sir.
Okay,
Okay, sir.
hold
Okay.
on. She has not answered the question. You say you want to ask Alhaji the question. Can you die for Nigeria?
That's what I wanted to ask Alhaji. That's what it's a question that many young persons like me
is already 80. He's already 85. You are young. Okay, Achike, she's dodging my question.
Yes. Yeah. I will answer this question. It's a heavy question, I must tell you, and I think it took me unawares completely. I will answer it by not answering it, but I think I would do well to answer it. Now, it might not be about Nigeria, and at the same time, it's about Nigeria. Maybe another way of asking that question or rephrasing it, if you forgive me, sir, or permit me, is to say, our ideals, our values, worth fighting for and dying for. So if values are worth dying for and fighting for, what are those values? Values of truth, values of commitment, values of love for humanity, values of love for country. Because when you love humanity, you must love your country. You know, and so, and I think maybe some of us have put ourselves in that situation of either dying or living on behalf of the country. Because some of us have been at the barricades, being threatened by soldiers and policemen to shoot. And sometimes some of us have had the temerity to tell them to shoot. At that moment, shots might have been fired, and that might have terminated the lives of some people. Now, it was also, and what were we doing at the barricades? We were fighting to make our country better. And in trying to make our country better, to change the lives of our people. And in that process, threats were made, and people called the bluff of those people making those threats. So perhaps in a way, that's why I said it's about ideals. Our ideals in Nigerians, our belief in the country, and that this country is worth fighting for. And if in the process of fighting for this country, something happens, something negative, something untoward happens, and one loses one's life, then one can say, yes, one has been able to make the ultimate sacrifice. You know, okay. But would we willingly, openly allow that to happen? That might be a different thing. That's the only way I can answer this, sir.
Thank you, Achike. Wait, let us wake up some dead people. Wake up on Nkrumah and speculate on what he will say today about Africa. Just wake him up.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Sorry.
Wake up Kwame Nkrumah. Wake him up as we are talking. and speculate on what he's going to say about Africa today. Just
that
wake
is
him up.
Kwame Nkrumah. Yeah, Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes, just wake him up.
Yes, Kwame Nkrumah will always stand for the ideas of Pan-Africanism.
Okay.
And the defense of humanity at any given time. But as for whether Nigeria is worth living for or dying for, if you live in a country and your family lives in that country, if you don't defend that your home, then you may not survive also. They are like ideals also. Ideals and ideas are worth living for. And of course, they're also worth dying for. Otherwise, you live for nothing. And he who lives for nothing will die for nothing.
Can Sikora wake up Fela and Nicola Kuti? What do you think he will say today? There was a song he composed. Yes, can you wake him up?
I think the song Zombie or Zombie would have been so heightened.
All of you are having internet challenges today.
Am I audible? I think I'm audible.
Yes, for now, yes.
Yes, I think Fela would have remixed his song Zombie or Zombie to respond to the realities of today, which I think has gotten worse. And a lot of people have sank into themselves even deeper. There are a lot of silos. People are now bent on individualism. Organizing is at its lowest. And people just do not have the resilience, the power to respond to issues as they would ordinarily or should ordinarily have done. And then even looking at governments of Africa today, how they play in the global space, our debt profile, our economic development, in fact, the infrastructural challenges that we continue to face. And even when you compare today's world and the world of yesterday, and how it would seem that infrastructure was even much more available to people of yesterday than of today, you would just, I think Fela would go on to remix Zombie or Zombie.
Okay. I won't give a dead body to Professor Olayinka, but I will ask him to ask our legendary labor union leader his first question. What question do you have for him?
Okay, thank you, sir. Well,
yes.
Please, can you hear me? Please, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
I mean, it's just going to be a simple question to the Honorable Elder Hassan Sunmonu to say that do you think the labor movement has done enough for our great country, Nigeria? Now, you are not on trial, sir, but everything considered, from your days till those who succeeded you, do you think the labor union has done its best for the Nigerian people? Thank you, sir.
We cannot hear you, sir. We can't hear you.
It's very low, no, very low.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, first I would like to thank all of you for your initial comments, but specifically to the question of Professor Olayinka and the coordinator here, whether the Nigerian trade union movement had done enough, if I understand the question very well.
Yes, sir.
Can I have the question?
He said, do you think Nigerian labor, the trade union, have they done enough?
Well, under the circumstances, I would say they have done enough. Why do I say that? The situation, the socio-economic situation of Nigeria is changing fast from one day to the other. And it reminds me of one of our Yoruba proverbs that says that Òṣà ní dààmú Ọlọ́run Tóyìn kì í ṣe ajákájá. There's a dog called Ọlọ́run Tóyìn, a brilliant dog that normally catches a lot of game from the bush. But Ọlọ́run Tóyìn is being bedeviled by one, either the ailment or the other, as a result of which it was not as effective as it used to be. So that's why people say, look, the gods have been worrying the dog called Ọlọ́run Tóyìn, that Ọlọ́run Tóyìn, that dog, is not a bad dog. What do I mean? The situation, the socio-economic, political situation in Nigeria today is not as it was in our old days. Everything in Nigeria is now monetized. You know, the politicians are buying almost everything. And some of their socio-economic policies is what some development economists call if I remember it, they call it they use economic policies to pauperize the people, to make them weak and unable to react to defend their rights. That is exactly what is happening today. The take-home salary of workers is not enough to feed them and their families for 2 weeks. So they do, you know, extra jobs here and there to be able to pay rents, high cost of fuel, high cost of this and that, high cost of even schooling. Even public schools are demanding, you know, they are charging fees. As a result of which, the people, generally the people are suffering from poverty, real poverty, staring the people in the face, and they are using that poverty, you know, to reduce the agitation by the people to defend themselves and their rights. That is exactly what is happening. I don't know whether I've been able to capture the question, the answer to your question well.
So you did. So, Achike, do you have a question for him, please?
Yes, I do, sir. Yeah, I want to ask the great comrade. By the time he became engrossed more in within Labour itself, became General Secretary of OATU, was involved in Nigerian Labour Congress. This was about maybe 18 years after the country had gained independence. He and his colleagues across the African continent must have looked into the future. When they looked into the future at that time, what did they see? And now that future is here upon us, and he has lived that future, is there any disappointment? Or is it despair, anger, or hope? That is just what I want to know. What was the vision that they had about the continent of Africa, not just in Nigeria, and the role that Labour needed to play? But that future is here now. You can see it. Is he disappointed? Is he disillusioned? Is he angry? Is he in despair? is he hopeful that we can still recover what we have lost if he admits that we have lost anything? That's just the comment I want to make, sir.
We lost a lot of things, but not hope. We have not lost hope. Because anybody who is a believer in whatever religion, the moment that person loses hope, then it becomes an infidel. One, we are disappointed, yes. Naturally, one is disappointed because the enormous human and natural resources that African countries are endowed with, they are enough to make every African country richer than any other country in other continents. What do we lack? Good leadership. Good leadership. What are the type of leaders we have today? Leaders who people say, and one may tend to believe in what they say, that they are selfish, they are greedy, they are unpatriotic, and they are visionless. Because any leadership that lacks those four main items, they cannot bring their country from poverty to prosperity, from underdevelopment to development. There is hardly any African country today that is not endowed with more than 5 major minerals of note. Every African country today. And how can people develop if we don't give a real assistance to education at all levels? It is said that education makes a people easy to govern, but difficult to enslave. The Vice Chancellor, Brother Lanika, has just said it. The primary and secondary education have been virtually destroyed. The universities, public universities are also on the verge of being destroyed, but for the likes of unions like ASU, Academic Staff of Universities, which are trying to salvage the situation. And these are leaders who enjoyed free education in their own days. So, but we have not lost hope. We cannot lose hope because whether they like it or not, something we give. Something we give.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wait, do you have a question to ask him?
Yes, I was going to ask Alhaji. He has mentored a lot of people who were his own mentors. And how did they impact on him? Or what impact did they have on him?
Well, I have been very lucky to have been mentored by one of the greatest African trade union leaders, the late Comrade Wahab Goodluck, was my mentor. And I'm proud to say that. I don't know whether current trade union leaders have mentors that we used to have in those days. because I have not used more than 85% of what I learned from the late Comrade Goodluck throughout my trade union career. I've not used more than 85% of what I learned from him. You can imagine, because initially I was an ordinary member of the union that he led. And within 10 years, I became president of the union that was state general secretary of. And in those 10 years, what I learned had benefited me throughout my trade union career, including in the Organization of African Trade Union Unity, and even at the ILO level, where for over 25 years, without being an elected member of the ILO governing body, I had the privilege of attending, meetings of being invited as of right to the ILO governing body meetings for over 25 years.
Thank you very much. Professor Olayinka, do you place your question?
Well, thank you, sir, for giving me yet another opportunity. I want to ask the Baba Trade Union leader, Elder Sunmonu, how do you think, given all our peculiarities as a nation, the challenges, some of which, or most of which we have, you or your good self, you have even identified. But, I alluded to the issue of education. For example, we also have a similar problem with health, provision of health services. We all agree that health is wealth. But, there was a time I went to Ilaramok in those states. So there was a South African who was there with us. I think a visiting professor at Elizabeth University at that time. So then there was a Professor Konofa, who is a professor of medicine, actually obstetrics and gynecology from University of Benin. He's now retired. He's an emeritus professor. I'm just trying to narrate this story. So that South African just ask a simple question, that if you have a case of a medical emergency, that's what will happen. Professor Konofa didn't have to think about it. He said, if you have a medical emergency in Nigeria, he said you will just die. That was his reply. He said you will just die. He said his own mother was dying like this, that he couldn't even do anything, even as a professor of medicine. So now I've mentioned the issue of education, but I think these are fundamental things. How can we improve? I know the trade union leaders, there's a limit. They cannot be going on strike every day. But how can we make our leaders to be more sensitive to basic provision of health services? It's not as if it's the trade union leaders alone that can solve all the problem, but they have a vital role to play. So, we have discussed education, for example, that the unions, whether it's a union of secondary school teachers, they are trying their best, even if the proprietors, in this case, the government, is not doing it. But now coming to another one that is fundamental, because I look at it, when you consider the Nordic countries, their life expectancy is very high, and it keeps increasing because of advances in medical sciences. Around is languishing, less than 60 years. So anybody over 60 years in Nigeria is very old. It's not as if the God that you worship loves them more than us, just because of these basic things that you have not taken care of. Because if the workers are not healthy, they die prematurely and all that. So how can the organized labor unions make government see reason why they need to improve medical services, whether it's health insurance or whatever it is? I don't have the answer, but I'd like to inquire from you, sir. What do you think the trade union, the organized trade union, can do in our own enlightened self-interest as a nation? Thank you, sir.
Well, I agree with you in total. Health is wealth. We have to hold our leaders, political leaders, accountable. We are paying taxes. Where are the taxes going? Look at the salaries of our political leaders. Higher than even salaries of political leaders in more advanced countries like America, Europe, and the like. They are the highest paid political leaders in the world. If we don't hold them accountable, the jamboree will continue. And we don't want that jamboree to continue. And that's why there's the need for trade union leaders, workers, civil society organizations, and intellectuals to come together to start to ask the difficult questions from our leaders. Because if we don't do that, they will go on as if, nothing is happening. I said earlier that people say our leaders are selfish, that our leaders are corrupt, that our leaders are unpatriotic, that our leaders are visionless. A leader should have a vision that, look, country A, B, C, they are above Nigeria, socially and economically. In 5 years' time, I will take my country, Nigeria, to overtake those 3 countries. That's vision. But that's not the vision of our political leaders, which is unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. In the sense that, look, we have the resources. The resources are not being spent for the welfare of the people. The wealth is being spent for the welfare of the leadership, which constitutes less than 10% of the population. So that's where we are. But if we hold them accountable, now they want to increase our taxes. We must demand where those taxes go. Education, health, agriculture. But what are they doing? They want to build flyovers, to the neglect of rural roads that could bring succor to agriculture. Because the flyover they are building and the 4-lane, 5-lane, 6-lane carriageway they are building, how many people can afford the vehicles to ply on them? Whereas rural roads will help our agriculture, to grow in the sense that farm produce will not be rotting on the farm as a result of lack of access, and so on and so forth. So this is not rocket science. So it depends on where we put our priority. Their priority is for their own good health and that of their family. When they are sick, they go abroad at the expense of the public. Whereas what they go to treat abroad could easily be treated at home at less cost and to the benefit of the other members of the Nigerian community. So do we call that vision for leadership that cares for its people? What I was trying to remember the other time is weaponization of poverty. They are weaponizing poverty to make it impossible for people to react to all their shenanigans.
So, is this problem just about leadership? Don't we have a followership problem? And the followers also good people.
Yeah, the followers also are also as guilty because, for example, when the price of petrol rises or reduces by a certain percentage, It is not reflected in the cost of transport. What goes up in Nigeria doesn't come down. Even when the prices of petrol come down, the prices of transport will not come down. The market women, also cheat on the public, and so on and so forth, because, that is their own way of getting their own, like the visionless political leaders are doing. A market woman will hoard goods, will not be satisfied with a little price increase for profit, would like to double or triple. Landlords also the same thing. So it's not only the leaders, it's also we, the people. But okay, look at under Idiagbon, Buhari at that time, their first coming, there was discipline. Until they themselves broke that introducing discipline before the whole thing broke down again. So, but it's time to start from somewhere. Look, if our leaders stop going abroad for their health reasons, they are going to be forced to make sure that our hospitals here are well equipped, well staffed, and well run. But if for even Qatar, they have to fly to London or Paris or elsewhere in Europe, where do we go? Will they care for what is happening to their people at home, the hospitals? This is what they're saying. There must be a moratorium to make it impossible for any Nigerian to go abroad for medical treatment for any disease that could be treatable in Nigeria. But let them make the law, they'll be the first person to break the law. That's our problem in discipline.
Sikora, you want to ask a question, please?
Yes, thank you, Prof. And also thank you to the legend. My question to Pa Hassan is, in your era, Comrade Hassan, labor unions worked closely with student movements and other popular forces. And you yourself emerged as from the student union organizing. Today, that alliance appears to have been weakened because civic space on many Nigerian universities or in many Nigerian campuses is shrinking. In fact, last year, a number of universities across the country, public universities and institutions, rusticated students simply because students rejected hiking school fees, and so some of them were just rusticated just like that. And to many observers, including somebody like me, it looks like the kind of repression that labor unions, particularly ASU, fights against. ASU has been proscribed and banned by governments at different points in time, and they have fought against it. And like my colleague Prof earlier said, ASU remains one of the leading voices in the country that continues to resist injustice, whether we like it or not. But what you see on campuses is that genuine student movements and student activists continue to be repressed, intimidated, and just summarily rusticated. What do you think has changed in the relationship between labor unions, like ASU or academic authorities, and student movements? What lessons can the unions of today, university authorities, and student organizers draw from your own era? In particularly, I want to ask you, because this also connects to the question that Professor Falola asked earlier, and that is Nigeria worth dying for? I have students who have been summarily rusticated calling me every day because they are deeply traumatized. They are mentally going through a struggle because they keep asking, is it worth it? I just peacefully asked that school fees not be increased, and I've been rusticated. My parents have been asking me, is that what I sent you to school to do? So what would be your message to university authorities in how they respond to demands by student movements, student unions, and what is also your message to student activists who are operating under pressure?
The Nigerian students have not been immune from the bug that has beaten the Nigerian society. Today, a student union leader, say the president of the student union of this campus or that, has a PA, personal assistant. He lives as if he's the governor of the student union. We didn't have those things nowadays. A president of student union having a PA, and they have all been corrupted by politicians. Even their election on campus, note it. A lot of politicians, pump money and candidates to be elected as student union leaders on campuses. Something that never happened in our time. A student union leader elected on the platform of a politician that had brought in millions to influence the election of a particular person as leader. Would that student union leader disobey him? That is where the problem started. So we have to go back to the drawing boards. I know that ASU has made up its mind, to also, like in the past, used to be closer to the students' union of their universities, to give them education, civic education, and their role also in society as part of, what they will take out of that university. So when they get out of the university, they will be on the side of the people and not on the side of the oppressors of the people. Look, when we were fighting for the minimum wage in 1981, for example, one of the students' union leaders, I don't want to mention his name, but I'm not afraid of it's not a libelous thing. He came, he mobilized the students to oppose our asking for minimum wage. And when some of his members came to see us, they said, look, he's a worker in training. When he leaves the university, he will join the working class. He come and experience what we're experiencing. And because some politicians are giving him some money to oppose us, it's not a, he will see when he comes out, he will see that the fight we are fighting is also for him, even though at the time we are fighting, he was still a student. So you see, some of the union leaders, student union leaders, have been compromised by politicians who want to make use of them. Some politicians have also infiltrated some of the trade unions to destabilize them. They tried it when I was also president of the Nigerian Labour Congress. We are almost split into two, but by deft, work that we did with our colleagues, we maintained the NSC as one. But after I left, they divided NSC into almost three. NSC became NSC. They created some other two national trade union centers. Today, again, we have two now. Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress. It's part of the work of politicians to make sure that workers don't speak with one voice in order to weaken the trade union movement. We know that. We are talking. The trade union leadership, they are talking. Where the interests of the workers are concerned, they will not compromise. But it's only in unity that the strength of the trade unions lie. But it is that unity politicians want to break through corruption, corrupting individuals within the movement. They have even gone even up to civil society organizations, where some good activities that we used to know in those days. Some of them, when they talk today, you think that they are part of the propaganda machinery of one politician or political party or the other. It's a shame because of chop. But we have to fight it because those who are corrupting them don't mean any good for Nigeria. They want Nigeria to be weak. That's why I refer to as the popularization of weaponization of poverty. They want Nigeria to be weak, to be poor, so that they will not be able to fight for their rights. But their days are numbered.
What do you mean by that their days are numbered? What do you mean, sir?
Look, we have a saying in Yoruba, a proverb that says that 1,000 years that lies start to travel. One day, truth will start that journey and overtake the lies of 1,000.
Professor Lainka, please, can you ask him a series of questions on education so that we can have a focus on education?
Okay, thank you, sir. I was just going to ask, he just, Comrade Hassan Sunmonu just mentioned the fact that maybe towards the end of his tenure, or even during his tenure, there was an attempt to factionalize the labor union into maybe 2 or 3. A similar thing also is happening with ASU. I think there's one funny one that they call a corner or something like that.
Yes.
So, ASU has been fighting for us, and we think ASU has all the wherewithal, at least over the last, since about 1977, that's one, from the records that I have, that's almost 50 years. But somehow there is, maybe there was a problem or some disagreement on one of 2 campuses. So a group now decided to form their own parallel group, just like a political party splitting into 2. So it's because I don't even know. If somebody is a lecturer, you don't even join the university because you want to be an ASU member. But one would have thought that ASU was fighting for the soul of the university. But now the Federal Minister of Education or Minister of Labor, they have to now deal with 2 labor unions. I don't know whether they're going to have 2 salary structures, one for ASU members, one for members of the other splinter group. So I think if CAR is not taking some of the issues that you have mentioned, you have alluded to during your own time as president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, also coming to the education sector, a follow-up so that Baba can answer the 2 together, is to say, what can we do to strengthen the educational system, especially at the primary school level and the secondary school level? Given that I don't know how strong the Nigerian Union of Teachers is, for example, to fight for the welfare of teachers that are employed at those levels of education, the primary and secondary school, and of course the product of the primary school and the secondary school are those ones that we enter the tertiary institutions, whether college of education, polytechnic or monotechnic, or even the university. So if you cannot build something on nothing, that's why you find a student in which JAMB will say somebody who scored 140 marks out of 400 can enter the university. Don't have one time. If you don't score 50%, then you retake the entrance exam to the university. In fact, it's an institution like Adeyemi College of Education, which was then running National Certificate of Education NC. To enter Adeyemi College of Education those days was very tough. But now a guy who scored 35% can enter a university. That to me is a joke taken too far. That's because the quality of education at the lower levels is suspect, and we seem to prioritize quantity over quality. A guy finishes the university cannot even write a simple sentence in the English language, so it becomes a problem. So inadvertently, the policy makers are interested in how many hundreds of thousands enter the university, not the quality, not whether we have the carrying capacity. So I think the problems are just interwoven. Of course, if I were to be a parent, my child, 17 or 18-year-old, finish secondary school, wants to enter university, I don't want him or her to stay at home. But that is in terms of entering the higher institution. But we also have to worry about the quality. Imagine that the teachers who teach them are, I mean, just like eminent Comrade Sunmonu mentioned, that the workers are not even happy. I think under Jega, the slogan was that my take-home pay cannot take me home. I think it's even worse now. And now, of course, federal government is talking of increasing the salary of university workers by 40% through the good works of President Chris Piguna. But of course, 40% of zero is zero. So I'm not even sure it's going to make a much impact. Maybe that's how far the government can go. We don't think it can even stem the issue of Japa. People are leaving the university in droves. Thank you, sir. Maybe it's more of a comment than a question.
Well, it's, let me just comment that, look, the breakaway, the so-called breakaway faction from ASU called CONUA, how many collective bargaining agreements have they signed since they came in? They were created by government to be an opposition, the diversion, and the diversion to ASU. They have not signed, they cannot point to one collective agreement they have signed with government. And they are always what do you call it? Always going on the back of ASU's negotiations. They benefit from ASU's negotiations, but they say they are CONUA because they are created by government. So it's not in the interest of any university lecturer in Nigeria today to be a member of a breakaway faction that is being controlled by government, that has not even had one single collective agreement. Look at what we have said earlier about the agreement that ASU over the years have signed because that have benefited public universities in Nigeria. But look, there is a deliberate intention by some people to weaken public universities so that they can create their own private universities. There are more private universities in Nigeria today than public universities, but all their students put together is just 5% of university students in Nigeria, even though they are more in number. ASU, the public universities still have 95% of Nigerian students. So it is in the interest of the public, it is the interest of Nigeria, it is the interest of education that, public universities should be strengthened, should be, funded, and should be encouraged to actually attain world-class standards than just, neglecting them for some of these people to set up private universities. As many of them that can only admit only 5% of the student population in Nigeria. Go ahead, Prof.
Let me turn to Achike. The role, two issues for Achike: democracy. Is the cost of this democracy not larger than its values?
Wait, is the cost of this democracy not
larger than its values?
Than its values? Well, I think the answers are obvious. I mean, people have been talking about it for a very long time. What are we getting for this democracy? People talk about, I know the debate has gone on for quite some time, about the kind of democracy we are running. Is it really appropriate for Nigeria? And it got to, I mean, a funny level, even where military dictators in those days were also perhaps, in order trying to feather their own nest, they were also making such insinuations that after all, that we must look for homegrown democracy. Homegrown democracy. When you look at, if you are talking about homegrown democracy, you are looking at how many nationalities, for instance, that we're talking about. We remember how this country was put together, how the country was cobbled together, different nations making up a one country, without this, the various nations making up the country coming together to come and talk. I mean, we are also grateful to organizations like the NLC, because the NLC obviously has become a centripetal force in this country rather than centrifugal. And I think Comrade Owe talked about it. The fact that in spite of the divisions in this country that are becoming more and more glaring every day, that the NLC as a national union, cutting across religion, cutting across parochial, affiliations, geopolitics, religion, ethnic groups, and all that grouping has been able to somehow play a role in keeping Nigerians together. But the cost to our democracy, I want to believe it has been heavy, because you're talking about a country that has been so much endowed, and I think the comrade Hassan himself said it when he was talking about the resources that we have at our disposal. Even the population of Nigerians too is also an important resource, and he did say, how can we have all of this and yet the country is wallowing in poverty? So I think it's a great question. I'm not sure that we have gotten anything for the democracy that we are running. We have not. I mean, when you have a country where about 50 or 60% are operating below the poverty line, then there's a problem with the democracy. A democracy that has not given much to the people. And it is critical, and maybe I would like to stop by saying this. We are today talking about we are talking today about the rude incursion into the politics of African countries, especially West African countries, by military adventurists. And we have always maintained that military governance is an aberration to democracy. But we keep on, even when we are talking about it and condemning, military incursion in politics, we pay less attention on the reasons, on the root causes of military incursion into politics. And that is the fact that democracy is failing across the West African sub-region. It is why when there is a crisis, when there is a coup, whether in Guinea or other parts of West Africa, you see the vast majority of people out on the streets celebrating, the coming into power of military adventurists. And you blame them. There's nothing to show for it. Are you talking about the teeming number of youths that are jobless across the continent? Are we talking about the divisions, the fractious divisions that are brought about by the politicians in order to win elections? They have to divide the people along parochial, ethnic and religious lines. Are we talking about that? So what have the politicians brought to us? What has democracy actually brought to us, if you look at it in real terms? So I think it is much more, maybe the more we look for ways to express ourselves. Yes, we know that the colonialists have come and gone, and we have accepted the reality of the countries that they have cobbled together, and we have to try as much as possible to live with ourselves. But there must be a basis for coming together, and that is and the only way we can achieve that is that we actually somewhere along the line need to come together. There, of course, we know that we have shown ability to live among ourselves. We have shown our ability to intermarry among ourselves. So all of these, divisions are not to some extent artificial, being put in place by the politicians to feather their own nest by keeping us divided and not asking relevant questions. But the reality is that somewhere along the line, we need to come together. And I think that Labour as a pan-Nigerian organization has a very large role to play in that direction when eventually, and lastly, the comrade himself said, he alluded to the fact that it's a matter of time, because truth that is spoken today will eventually overtake the lies that has been traveling for the past 20 years. And then at that moment, we have to sit down and look for a way to talk sense into ourselves, if we want to build a country that works for all.
If you allow me to come in.
Sir, please, go ahead, sir.
I think democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. And the welfare of the people should be the basis for all democracies. The democracy we have had in our country, Nigeria, today, the welfare of the people have not been taken into consideration. People have been made poorer and more miserable than before. Is that what they call the fruit of democracy? Poverty, unemployment, insecurity. High indebtedness on behalf of the people. All the debts that have been called on our behalf. Where have all the money gone? Where has all the money gone? What have they done with it? We cannot be living on lies. The people deserve to know the truth. We are not being told the truth. It's governed by propaganda at all levels, local government, state government, federal government. They have been lying to us about the state of things. Our money has been embezzled left, right, and center to the detriment of the welfare of the people. The people are disillusioned, massive joblessness, insecurity. How do you expect patriotism from a people that are defenseless, that are being robbed every day by leaders that have no conscience? Is that the Nigeria we all fought for? I leave the answer to you.
Wait,
Yes, sir.
can you add corruption to this analysis?
Okay.
Is the system viable? If you have large-scale corruption, as Sunmonu he wasn't using the word corruption, he was using mismanagement and embezzlement. Can a corrupt system, can it actually deliver?
Thank you very much, sir. I was going to add that to the origin itself, because Comrade Sunmonu's leadership in the 1980s opposed the IMF and World Bank conditionalities and structural adjustments, like privatization. And it even issued a statement, a pamphlet, popular one, titled Nigeria Not for Sale. So, and privatization is about corruption also. It's about the sale of public goods to a few people. So, Comrade Sunmonu,
Yeah.
when you look back at the campaigns you have carried out on the IMF and its conditionalities, on structural adjustments in the last 4 years, will you say you have been right?
We have been right. We have all been right.
And secondly, sir, sir, is there an alternative to these neoliberal policies and the system of corruption that we now have? Are there alternatives?
There are alternatives. There are alternatives. Because once the welfare of the people takes precedence over the payment of dubious debts to the IMF World Bank, takes, precedence over the corrupt money they are using to stay in power, then the life of the ordinary people will be improved. The economy itself will improve and will not be borrowing every time we want to pay salaries, every time we want to do this and that, borrowing, and borrowing. We don't know what they are borrowing for. They have made Nigeria almost so indebted that whether our debt will remain payable or unpayable. I cannot even fathom. So we have to sit down our leaders. We don't want any money again to be borrowed. And we want account to be made of all the money borrowed, what they did with it. Because the people are there to be able to say, okay, we did this for this, we did this for that. How can you build a 6-lane road from Lagos to Calabar and give it to only one contractor?
Yes.
That's not. We came back from Italy. We studied highway engineering in Italy in 1975. We came back, we made a recommendation to the ministry that such roads should be broken into lots of 10 kilometers. And a consortium of private contractors will come and bid for each of those lots. And then 50 kilometers, about 5 of those contractors that are bid up to 50 kilometers, they will toll it for 15 years, after which the whole road returns to the government. The federal government does not need to spend a kobo for those kind of roads. No tender. Where is the design? The Federal Ministry of Works should have designed that road. You get even the design of that road is given to the contractor who is going to build.
I thought the contractor, sir, I thought the contractor in your example now is tied to the presidency itself.
Tied to the presidency?
Yes, the road.
The highways in Italy, the contractors that built them are not tied to their presidency.
No, I mean the example of the Lagos Calabar. What people are saying is that your president is by himself the contractor.
I don't know about that, but what I'm saying that is wrong is that first, the Federal Ministry of Works would have designed that road. They have the engineers to do that. The Federal Ministry of Works would have split that road into lots of 10 kilometers. And as a consortium of different contractors, private contractors coming together to build each of those and about 10 lots, 5 lots that up to 50 kilometers will then be tolled. The government will decide the toll, what the toll payment should be, and then for 15 years, after 15 years of collecting the toll, that road will belong to the government, without the federal government or Nigerian government spending a dime. If you have a way to do that, why do we take the debt inducing method of doing it? And to one contractor? It's wrong. What is wrong is wrong. Until that, that's what you are saying.
Thank you, sir. Professor Olayinka, how will you respond to the criticism that intellectuals like you have no space in the current democracy?
That the intellectuals have no space
in the current democracy. That what is the space of scholars in this current
democracy? Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment, really. Maybe I guess I align with that. So at times I just think about it that whether by design or by default, the country is divided into various strata. So you have those of us who are in the universities who have been sentenced to hard labor. I want just to teach students and the graduates, while you have the political class, you have the business class. Because there is no handshake between the academia and those in government. Whereas one would have thought that, especially for the public universities, they are funded largely by taxpayers' money. There should have been more synergy. I mean, recently we heard about that they won't be teaching mother tongue again. So we'll be wondering whether that one was, I mean, a good policy. Is that there should have been a policy statement to that effect? Someone like myself, I grew up in the village. So my parents used to speak Yoruba to me. I wouldn't know how I would then enter primary one and you started teaching me in English. It'd just be as if the lecturer at that level would be speaking in tongue. Because my parents could only speak Ijesha, not even Yoruba. Ijesha dialect of Yoruba. So for you to now unleash English on me, English was just a subject that you started learning in primary 3. And the good works done by the late Professor Fafunwa has shown that if you taught students in their mother tongue, they tend to excel later in life. The fact that I was communicating, or my parents were communicating with me and my siblings in the Yoruba language, I'm not sure it has detracted from my understanding of English. So I just give that one as an example. So many policies of government you can at times you wonder how do they come about this policy? Whereas the university, for example, I mean, one of our old professors, now emeritus professor, told us that as academic staff, that we are not paid to teach, but in his place, we are paid to think. You think there are problems, then how can we solve the problem? And the problem well stated is half solved. So, but I think in our own climes, the people in university, what government is interested in is you admit 5,000 students this year, then 4 years later, they graduate PhD economics, geology, or whatever. So nobody, so there is no handshake. Whereas there should have been government to set the policies, then the people in academia, whether it's university, colleges of education, or polytechnic, then the private sector. If you have cocoa farmers in Ondo State, how can the universities in Ondo State, for example, contribute towards improving the crop yield of cocoa, which on the long run will then also lead to greater productivity? Because I also think about it, like now maybe the highest paid professor in the Nigerian university system earns about $400 or something to that effect. But that has not always been the case. As of 2009, maybe the highest paid professor was earning like $3,000. I mean, the equivalent. Of course, we are paid in Naira. But because the value of the Naira has collapsed, then whatever they pay us is like peanuts, 15 years, 16 years down the line. So I think we cannot live in isolation. But like I said, my own understanding is that people in the university we have resigned to fate. You just teach your students. I mean, those who will pass, those who will not pass, will not pass. Since the government doesn't even care about what to do, of course, they think those people, they are just, the only thing they know how to do is to go on a strike. So I think to that extent, I think maybe we can do better. And I think government has the central role. I mean, Baba Sunmonu mentioned the fact that the public universities, that they admit about 90% of the students. I've looked at the data. It's going to even be worse. Well, depending on the way you look at it. Because as we speak, we have about 75 federal universities. But as of maybe 2019 or 2020, we're just like 40 federal universities. So the federal government keeps establishing more federal universities. And most of the private universities in Nigeria, only very few of them can admit up to 10,000 students. But you have a federal university established 4 or 5 years ago. It's now having 30,000 student population. So that percentage that Comrade Sunmonu mentioned is going to remain at that level of 95% or even increase. Because of a government policy, which I think on one hand is good in terms of student loans. Only students in the public universities, whether federal or state, can benefit from student loans. So it will be, I mean, of course, only so it's more difficult for students to not even go to private universities. Maybe on one hand, it's good that more are going to public universities, federal and state, but whether those universities have the carrying capacity is also a matter of details. Of course, those who can afford it can always send their children to private universities in Nigeria or South Africa or Europe or America. So I think it's a matter of the cost element. So I think it's a very complicated algorithm that we are dealing with. That's just my impression. I don't have the solution, but I've looked at it almost from about 40 federal. So of the 75 federal universities that we have now, about 50% of them were created only in the last few years. And of course, federal government now says they're going to be, a moratorium. But I'm sure even I think some polytechnics are also going to be converted into universities. So that ratio will always be in favor of public universities. But the difficult question is the level of funding and also the staffing. How many PhDs do our universities produce, which is the basic qualification to teach in the universities. So I think these are just my thoughts. Thank you, sir.
Sikora, how will you respond to the statement that the generation before yours destroy your own generation?
I think that has been a very that's an ongoing debate. That's an ongoing debate, and there is no yes or there is no yes or otherwise answer to that. I think the reflection that the generation before mine destroyed us has come from the increasing public disillusionment in the inability of organized labor, civil society, and even structures that are looked upon in society to respond decisively and critically to the problems of our time. And so that you have young people who have had stories and who once saw these structures as reputable, as structures that could command attention and bend the wheel of government to respond to people's needs. And they're just seeing that in real time, this is not happening and nobody is saying anything. So there's that antagonism, and that antagonism is what has actually shaped the conversation by many people of my generation that the older generation destroyed theirs. There's also the cautious approach of the older generation, when in conversation with young people like me, saying, oh, look, you do not need to sacrifice yourself. You do not need to do this. You do not need to do things like this. You mustn't approach by force. You have to add respectability to it. You have to approach in a certain way. And so that people who are organizing in recent times, mind you, and I'm saying this in quote, because that's also part of my earlier reflection where I said that in recent times we have seen people of my generation organize just by driving social media attention and using digital tools to call out injustice, and even without the backing of civil society or organized labor, they have emerged on their own as alternative forces and machines on the ground. And so because of the contention around it and the contemporary reality, that is what is informing the fact that younger persons are saying this generation destroyed us and this is what is happening. So at the end of the day, I think that the ultimate answer would be for us to go back to the core of our organizing, or the connection we have across different structures of mobilization. What has happened to fracture civil society, labor union, students organizing, and even the broader society? There was a time that, for instance, I grew up, at least as far back as I could remember, my childhood, I grew up at a time when if the labor union said it was going on strike, a week before that time, it didn't matter if the union did not go on strike or went on strike, people would rush outside and start buying, various utilities just to survive the moment, because they knew that the labor union was not playing and was going to go on regardless, or it was not, their statements were not something to take lightly. But you can't compare it with what has happened now. Labor union would say we are going on strike, and people are like, we don't care, whatever you want to do. People are still going business as usual. You even have situations where labor is under attack, and people are saying that's good, that's fine, and which is also a reflection of the question you asked, and at what cost has it come? Because of the challenges over time, people have become disillusioned. They've lost faith in institutions. So, and that is what, like I said, has continued to inform the various narratives of we versus them, your generation versus our generation. But ultimately, that's not going to help. The thing that is going to help is for us to go back to the drawing board and to see where we have failed and where the disconnect happened and how to patch up our structures, and so that we can restore faith once again in our organizing, in our mobilizing, and in our structures. Yes.
Suppose I were to challenge you with a statement that your generation will produce 419 politicians and they'll be worse than the people you have now.
I mean, of course, I don't think that that's a fair statement, right? Every generation has bad eggs, and you cannot say for certain that this particular generation is going to produce more bad eggs than what you had in the last generation. What indices are you using to measure that? And what have you also, if we talk about that, what have you also given to this generation to warrant them to be upright, standing in society, and to also give their best? I can recall that we have been discussing recently about the failure of government, the failure of society. You would note that back in your time, you had functional educational institutions, you even had public water running, you had public services, social institutions which were responsive to the needs of people. What you have now is vastly different. You have a society that doesn't care for its people. You have people who have never seen public water run in their lives. You have people who don't know what it is to go to school, what public education means. In this generation, you've had the imposition of student loans as a way out, saying if you have money, you can go to school. If you don't have money, don't go to school, and that's fine. But yet, there are people still, young persons or the generation we speak of now, are still carving their own space in history, and still making still making their way out of this mess that they found themselves, providing their water, providing their own technology, even taking the country out and bringing glory to the country in different ramifications. So I don't think that you can say for certain, or that's a conversation that we should um, we should focus on as a pointer to what generation did best, or what generation did not do better. Rather, we should concentrate on what exactly are the challenges, what are the failures of this time, what has gone wrong, and how we can respond to them. There would always be good or bad people in any generation. I can point, I can list and call, some politicians, very notorious politicians that we've read about in your generation. And I mean, yes.
You thought you would say that the 419 are better than current politicians. Thank you. So, Alhaji Sunmonu has to go to Abuja, is doing a book launch in 3 days' time. I've been very, very sensitive to his age and energy. So I've been protecting him by just creating equilibrium in this conversation instead of just basically focusing on him. We now want to turn to members of the audience. We only take questions from those who join by Zoom, people who have been sending questions, YouTube, Facebook. We don't take questions from them, unfortunately. Baba Aye of the Socialist Forum, you want to ask the comrade a question? Baba Aye.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, I can speak now. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure to ask a question. But first, two quick things. One, Alhaji, it's a pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, though I've been a trade unionist now myself for 28 years, the history of my knowledge of Baba and his inspiration goes way back to before I was even 10, when I was a child between 5 and 8. We lived in the same area, Community Road in Akoka. And our parents always used to say Baba was Olododo Eniyan. And there were reasons for this. Baba and his twin, Hussein, they also had houses there. And while there were people that were chairmen of branches of industrial unions that built houses within a year or two, the house that Baba built, it was by force of his twin brother Hussein. It was an open secret there. And so he is a man that is sincere and is an inspiration and has always been an inspiration. to us. And thank you, Amari Imbasa, and we hope a long life for you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and with regards to the issue, my question, because I mean the most pressing question at each point in time should be what is to be done. How do we move forward? And I mean, Baba has spoken of that. Look, you have poverty being weaponized, and you know, this being holding us down. But I, with all due respect, I think reality is much more complex, because even in your period, you know, that was when Obesan's austerity measure equal Lolo, you know. After it was within that period, even after he had left, that you had wage freeze and what have you. So in a sense, that something has not happened before, it's like using it to scare people. I see where we are now as more quantitative than qualitative. And the evidence also shows that despite that, people have been fighting. In the first 3 decades of Nigeria's history, there were only 2, arguably 3 general strikes. Morgan Commission, the one you led on minimum wage. Then during the June 12, there were about 3 or 4 general strikes. In the 25 years of this century, you have had over a dozen general strikes. You have had Occupy Nigeria with the role of the trade unions there. So what the evidence shows is a contradictory reality. Yes, there's that politicization and weaponization of poverty, but there is also fighting back. And this brings me to my question of that, is it not more of a question of poverty of philosophy? And when I say philosophy in this sense, not just philosophy in a generalized sense, but philosophy in the sense of, let's say, the modern prince, philosophy in a sense that harmonizes ideology, politics, and organization. Because I remember very well, Baba, you did say it that your greatest inspiration, Baba Wahab Goodluck. I was lucky to meet him as a student activist before he passed on. And one of the things I knew was that the NLC you led was closely tied to the Socialist Working People's Party. I mean, and that even when meetings were going on in NLC, in the 2 buildings from that, 25 Olajuwon, you had in If and Work Secretariat going on. Couldn't it be more a question of that break, that collapse of the place and vibrancy of the revolutionary left in terms of its hegemony within the working class and trade union movements? Because the people are fighting irrespective of the poverty of philosophy. And in your view, what is to be done to rebuild that lost dynamic? Thank you.
Thank you. Baba, you can write down the question and answer them later. The president of ASU, Chris Piwuna, University of Jos, president of ASU. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Falola, for this program as usual. And we'd like to congratulate Comrade Hassan Sunmonu on his 85th birthday and the launch of the book. We're all looking forward to it. My question to you, trustee, Comrade Sunmonu is our trustee, is, are we not agonizing even in this program now? Like, how many times have you tried as leaders of NLC to have a party, a political party, to help correct these things? What informed those efforts, and what has truncated all the plans to have a party that will speak for the Nigerian worker and ordinary Nigerians? Because if we're organizing, perhaps that's one way to go. Thank you.
I thought to be led the Labour Party until recently.
Well,
they did not run on the ticket of the Labour Party.
I don't know whether Peter Obi is one of those that Baba mentored to take over so that we'll stop agonizing.
Well, you can answer anytime you want to ask a question, sir. Go ahead and answer.
Yeah, let me begin with Comrade Piwuna's question before, because it related to the question by the first gentleman. First and foremost, NSC was actually terrorized, both during the military era and the civilian era, that trade union leaders should not form any political party because under the labor laws, the trade union dues should not be used to form any political party. And the leaders, trade union leaders were scared to such an extent that, look, if you decide to form a party, your trade union license will be withdrawn and so on and so forth. Until eventually, trade union leaders, after we left the NLC, had to, have a big conference in Calabar. I was invited because at that time I was already at Accra as Secretary General of the Organization of African Trade Unions. I wasn't able to come, but I sent Watu's treasurer, who was from Zambia, to represent me there. And it was at that Calabar conference meeting that it was decided to found the Labour Party, which I also supported. The Labour Party, as we know it today, was formed and founded by the Nigerian Labour Congress with the assurance that the Nigerian Constitution allows individuals or groups, to form or belong to any political party of their choice. It was a test of Nigerian Constitution that made Nigerian Labour Congress to found the Labour Party. Unfortunately, because of, it is said that in any structure, the foundation is the most important part of any structure. The foundation of the Labour Party was not well founded on a good foundation, because the two leaders that actually emerged, I don't want to tell us the history of how they emerged. One, Comrade Wanya, who was then of the banking union, and Comrade Salam. Comrade Salam is late now, may his soul rest in peace. Wanya, who as president, and Comrade Salam as the general secretary. They were the ones who actually mismanaged and destroyed the ethos of the Labour Party that Nigerian Labour Congress founded, which made it possible for them at that time, those politicians who failed to secure any representation in their political party, they pay some money and they become leaders of they become candidates of the Labour Party. That was how the wobbly foundation of the Labour Party was founded. That's why I was one of the people, I'm one of the people that never, adhered or belonged or even joined the Labour Party because of the way it was run at that time. And of recent, the Nigerian political disease has already crept into when the NSC, under the leadership of Comrade Waba, when they now rescued the Labour Party from the touts who are running it at that time, and secured the registration license of Nigerian Labour Party. Hope was the kindled in the Labour Party. Until those who are there now decided to now, sell the Labour Party to the highest bidder. And I was telling Comrade at the 10th anniversary of the death of Pascal, the late Pascal Baviao, former president of Nigeria Labour Congress too. At the 10th anniversary of his death at the Nigeria Labour Congress, I was around. I've already come back from Accra that time. In the office of the NSC president that time, Comrade Waba, Peter Obi was also there. He also came for the honor we did to the 10th anniversary of Pascal Baviao's death. I told them, and I was very frank, and I think that is still my position, that until the Nigerian workers start to contribute whatever the monthly contribution should be to the Labour Party, like Action Group was doing, you cannot say those days that you belong to the Action Group of Nigeria if you are not paying your dues. That until Nigerian workers start to pay their monthly dues to the Nigerian to the Labour Party of Nigeria, they cannot say the Labour Party belongs to Nigerian workers. And that is the way, I think, the way to go in order to rescue the Labour Party, from money bags, from hijacking the Labour Party from the true owners of the party, which who are Nigerian workers. They will have to be paying, if it is 20 kobo per month, we must know that this is our party. Everybody pays so that no money bag can come and hijack the Labour Party from Nigerian workers. Nigerian workers are the owners of the Labour Party of Nigeria. The license is with Nigerian Labour Congress up to now. That's it. On the other question, the Labour Party is a party that from day one should have an ideology that is, a progressive ideology, that, gathers the people together that are in the interest of Nigerian workers and people. Not name any of the political parties in Nigeria today that has an ideology. They don't have an ideology. That's why they are not different from each other. They are not different. They are all there to grab power for themselves and use it the way they want, not in the interest of Nigerian people and the Nigerian nation. So until the Nigerian Labour Congress and Nigerian workers eventually rescue the Labour Party and make it, owned by Nigerian workers with each, with all the branches of Nigerian Labour Congress, from the local government level up to the national level, having their own organs, branches of the Labour Party, and every member paying his monthly dues to sustain the Labour Party. You cannot say that the Labour Party belongs to Nigerian workers and Nigerian Labour Congress. That's the answer.
Thank you, sir. Margaret, okay or okay? Margaret, okay. Your comments or your questions?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I would like to congratulate Baba Sunmonu, and I thank Professor Falola for organizing this. Thank you very much, sir. My question has to do with the frequency of strikes of the different labor unions. For example, apart from the NLC, the common strikes that we experience in Nigeria come from the tertiary institutions. We have ASU, we have NASU, we have ASUP. And when maybe ASU calls for a strike, the federal government calls for negotiation. Immediately after that, you see another labor union also threatening to go on strike. This also applies to the health sector, where you have the doctors, the nurses, the technicians, different labor unions, coming up to, threatening to go on strike. Now my question is, how do we come together? How do we find a balance so that all these, too frequent strikes, different labor unions, threatening strike will come to an end so that we can strike a balance and everybody will continue their work without all this strike today, strike tomorrow. And I think presently the resident doctors, that is still threatening strike. The last time they went on strike, the federal government met some of their demands and they are insisting that all their demands must be met. Can the government meet all the demands of all these different labor unions? That's my question. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for that question. Workers are not just babies. They are adults. And some of these workers are old enough to be fathers of those in government. Don't forget that. The major reason for frequent strike is the inability of one party, after serious negotiations and agreement reached, one party refuses to carry out his own side of the bargain, of the agreement. And our government, I'm sorry to say, have been very notorious in negotiating with the trade unions. And so this negotiation take weeks, months. And at the end of this negotiation, each side will agree to carry out the bargain decisions that are reached at the bargaining table. The government will refuse to carry out its own side of the agreement. That's what leads to frequent and incessant strikes. I'm a trustee of ASU. I'm a trustee of ASU. I've taken part in several negotiations of ASU. And all the agreements, some of them lasting months. After the agreements have been reached, and the commencement of the agreement, the government on its own side will fail to abide by its own side of the agreement. That's the reason for most of the incessant strike. There's no need for incessant strike to continue to happen. If each side of the bargaining table, after negotiation, agrees to carry out decisions as reached on the bargaining table. That's what it's called. In my 6 years as pioneer president of Nigeria Labour Congress, we went on strike only once and for 2 days. May 11 and 12, 1981. For the entire 6 years I was president of NLC. Because we had an understanding. The decision we reached at the bargaining table were carried out by both sides of the negotiating partners. So there was no problem. But when the government sit down, an employer sit down with workers to negotiate, after negotiation, the employer, whether government or private sector employer, refuse to carry out his own side of the agreement. That's what caused the trouble.
Thank you. Kole Odutola.
Thank you very much, sir, for this opportunity to ask Baba a few questions. My very first one is, can you be a good union leader without being a Marxist? That's one. Can you be a good union leader without being a Marxist? The second one I want to ask is, I have noticed that the Nigerian Labour Congress has had projects, things like the NLC transport system. Now, what is the place of such projects and businesses within labor union? The final one is, I've always been told that there's been a problem between the north and the south of Nigeria on the question of the definition of labor, that in the North there are more peasants as opposed to laborers or people who offer their labor for payment and employment. And that how do you accommodate the peasants, for instance, in the Labor Congress? And was this ever a debate? Did you have any issues with that? Finally, what has been the greatest temptation you've had as a labor leader, sir? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. First and foremost, a trade unionist must be a populist that defends the rights and interests of its members. So if you call him a Marxist, a socialist, call him whatever thing. A trade union that does not have the interest of its members as prime consideration for the leadership of his union is not fit to be a trade unionist. You can call him whatever you want to call him. If you say I'm a Marxist, call me anything, I'm still a Muslim and a practicing one. So if you say a Marxist cannot be a true Christian or a true Muslim, then I'm not a Marxist then. I'm not a socialist. But I told you I had a mentor. My mentor was the late Comrade Hassan Sunmonu. He was a Marxist. He was born a Muslim, but was not a practicing Muslim. But in those days, when at the time of the 4 o'clock prayers, when you have a meeting and I go for prayer, to not mocking at me. Say, look at Sunmonu, the slaves of the Arab. That's what they call me. And I say, hey, I will say, Comrade Hassan Sunmonu, we used to joke. But it doesn't, it doesn't disturb my commitment or his own commitment to defending the rights and interests of the workers and Nigerian people. So you look at how many imams and how many pastors and so on and so on who are doing antisocial things, who are committing crimes, in spite of what they profess to be as religion. So whatever you are should be seen through your daily life, how you relate with others. So
Thank you.
I think that answers your question about being Marxist or socialist or whatever.
Thank you,
It
sir.
doesn't matter what you say you are. Comrade Hassan Sunmonu, for example, defended the interest of Nigerian peoples, not only workers. And he went to prison several times for doing that. That was the time he just said the Nigerian politicians and military have been have been leading the government of Nigeria. It was then the turn of Nigerian workers to lead Nigerian. It was put in prison for 9 months. Was detained for 9 months without charges for saying that. So it's different strokes for different people. Yeah.
Good evening, Prof. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, Professor Falola, for putting this great event together. And I want to also congratulate our elder statesman, Alhaji Comrade Sunmonu. Many of us only read about him. I never knew I would have a platform to also engage with him. So I'm very excited. So my question is this, because we're seeing that the world is changing and dynamics are also shifting. And I'm sure it's also affecting the labor movement. We're seeing that strikes and some other tools of labor is not as effective as it used to be in the past, which means that labor itself might need to go back to the drawing board. And my understanding is that the world is getting smaller and collaboration should increase, because most times when some of these interventions are in place, like the workers' strike, what you hear from the general populace is that leave them alone, they're only fighting for their pocket. So there's a level of mistrust, there's a level of misconception and misunderstanding between labor, its interventions, and the general population. So I want to find out from our veteran, is there a structure, is there a synergy between the congresses, the Nigeria Labour Congress and its affiliates, and CSOs and NGOs whose area of focus are also labor related? Because we might need to do more of education. We might need to engage the communities more. We might need to increase awareness, because the labor cannot do it alone. We see that things are changing. So we might have to have a melting point, so to say. So I want to know if there's really a working relationship where other CSOs and NGOs interested in labor issues can also collaborate and carry on with the Nigeria Labour Congress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very important question. In our time, we created that platform. When we are having May Days, which we won through collective bargaining as a result of the strike of May 1981, when we're having our May Day rallies, market women used to join our May Day rallies. I remember Alhaja Abiba Magaji, may her soul rest in peace, the May Day of 1982 at the National Stadium in Lagos. She led about 500 women, market women from Lagos to, in the parade. Of course, it was in the high, this thing, but the women marched with our members. So as the students, civil society organization, and so on and so on, we have that synergy. And it is still there. But because of the dynamics of, what I said earlier, of weaponization of poverty, a lot of hands out to some of these organizations is shifting them back from, mass this thing. But we are regaining the ground because that solidarity, that contact with other civil society organizations, the students' unions, the market women and men, we always have, meetings together on matters affecting, the nation. For example, during the anti-social adjustment program of the IMF World Bank, we were together with them. They worked together with us. The civil society organization, market women, and others. Students, they were with us. That's why when it was really subjected to national referendum, when President Babangida had a national referendum on SAP, IMF World Bank SAP or not, we won. He lost because of the mobilization that was carried out and the education that was done of the people, the general public of Nigeria. They rejected the IMF World Bank Social Adjustment Program, and that's exactly what the present government is bringing through the back door. The same rejected IMF World Bank Orthodox Structural Adjustment Program is what they are bringing in now. They are calling development. It's not development at all. It's a rehash of the same 1980s Orthodox SAP that Nigerian people, Nigerian workers, Nigerian people rejected. Because they don't want to, the so-called developing partners, they don't want us to develop. That's why they want to engross us with unpayable debts. That the money we should be using, for development, we'll be using to service debts, not even the payment of the actual this thing, only services of death. That's what they are doing.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Ademola Assis.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, congratulations to our veteran labor leader, Comrade Hassan Sunmonu. We are proud of you. Yeah, my own take is just to also actually bothered about the inability of the labor movement to organize workers for political power. And that you have also alluded to that in your previous presentation. We have some of our veteran comrades here. Why is it that we cannot use our ideological training and education that over the years the labor leaders have been able to resist certain impositions by the government? Why can't we also use that training to also mobilize Nigerian workers? Because we cannot be agitating for salary increase, for better welfare, if we don't have labor leaders in the saddle. Because what we have seen is that some labor leaders have been recruited by the so-called bourgeoisies. I mean, we have been criticizing all over the years. So, because how can we explain that the labor movement or the labor formed a political party and handed over such platform to the same people that have destroyed the country? I can't fathom it. I can't. So we want to know, sir, from your experience, that why was that possible? No, it would have. We are better educated. We have access to better, information, technology, and so on. But still, we are just paper tagger on the social media. We cannot organize ourselves, and it's an indictment on our generation. So please, that's just my. So I want to also hear. I mean, just for you to also, tell us what you feel we can do to also correct the bad situation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We have to go back to the drawing board, as I said, because the situation continues to evolve. And that reminds me of one of our brothers that said that that it is hunger that makes one to eat from one's enemy's table. The hunger that will, make us go and eat on our enemy's table, may God avoid it for every one of us. The situation is such that people are, just crying for survival first. It's when you survive that you're able to, you want to go to party, you want to go to cinema, you want to go to. It's when you are, if you are hungry, you can't think of all that. So it's hunger that has been unleashed on the people. It's poverty that has been unleashed on the people that they are now using as, weapon to make the people docile. And that's what we have to change. We have to change all that, also through education. Because when the people know what is happening, they are going to react differently to what they are seeing today. That's what I'm saying, it's not going to be forever. People are now seeing. We have seen all the political parties. They are using money, bribery, and so on to put themselves in power and to stay in power and continue their corruption and everything, to the detriment of the welfare of the masses, to the detriment of the development of the country. They want to buy the whole country. for themselves and their family. They're not thinking of the future of the Nigerian people. They're not thinking of the future of the Nigerian nation. They're thinking only of themselves and their families in power. And that's all. And we have to reject that.
Bola Dauda, thank you, sir. Bola Dauda, let's take 3 more so that Baba Sunmonu can go and rest.
Yeah.
He's
Thank you.
85 years. We have to respect that.
Thank
Bola
you.
Dauda, please.
Thank you, Professor Falola, and thank you and congratulations on your birthday, Baba. I have 2 areas of concern. You told us that there is still hope. And I've been looking for that hope, and I think you can help me. It has to do with 2 areas. One has to do with systemic corruption. The corruption we have in Nigeria is not an individual, it's not about politicians who are corrupt. And you told us that, when there is any drop in petrol that accounted for increase in transportation and so on, it doesn't reflect. We have university professors who will go for accreditation, and they meet their friends who have been hired from other universities to boost the staff. At the end of the day, they said everything is okay, that the resources are all right, and they accredit. That's just what I mean by systemic. You want an international passport. I had the experience of going online, and I've completed everything. As a senior citizen, it was 11,500 then, and the current price was 27,000. The person who's going to capture has his own share. Everybody has his own share. That's what I mean by systemic. If you want your driving license renewed, there is already your vehicle license. There's already stated amount for the VIO, stated amount for the person who will capture, and so on. I'm giving these examples, and I'm sure you have all experienced it in one form or the other. And Labour Congress are the staff of all these institutions. So how can we say there is still hope if there is no way of beating the corruption of the followers as well as of the leaders? The second area of concern has to do with education. The professor told us that university is not collapsed, that is the primary and secondary. And I want to ask myself, can this be the fact if when you go to any secondary school, you can't get teachers, and generally people don't want to be teachers. And then to get these universities, that the colleges of education, last year it was 20% jump to be admitted to colleges of education that will produce the professors we need tomorrow. It has now been increased to 25%, 100 out of 400 points at JAMB exam. Where is hope if no nation can rise above the quality of its teachers? And we have a situation in which our future teachers, who don't even want to be teachers, are being admitted for training at 20%, 25% at the Joint Admission Board. Thank you, sir.
Well, first and foremost, thank you. I agree with you. The whole situation is systemic. But don't forget our proverb that says that when you have many trees falling on each other, you cannot go, directly to go and retrieve the one at the very bottom. Otherwise, you will break your back. No, even if it's a crane, it will break. the crane. So you have to pick it from top, one by one, till you get to reach the bottom. First and foremost, we have to identify what are the problems we have. You have mentioned the systemic corruption. How do we stamp it out? We begin from the beginning. First, education. Two, leadership. If a leader in a branch, you say immigration or whatever, is a very strict and correct person, he will inspire those under him or her to also be clean and be correct. So it cannot be done in one day. I agree with you. But don't forget the Chinese proverb that says that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. We have to start somewhere. Have we started? The day a mad person knows that he's mad, that's 50% of the cure for him already. Do we agree that we are corrupt? We don't.
Thank you,
We
Baba.
don't agree we are corrupt.
Thank you. Let's just take two more. Ishmael Bello. Ishmael.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Falola. Thank you for this very wonderful initiative and for celebrating an icon of the Nigerian labor movement, Comrade Hassan Sunmonu. It is my pleasure to be on this platform. You have been an inspiration through generations, and in an increasingly hopeless situation, you still represent hope for some of us in terms of the quality of integrity that you have brought into the leadership. Two questions I have, one on politics and the one on my personal encounter with you sometimes in 1998. The one on politics, some of our colleagues from the Ghanaian trade unions will always allude that in their constitution, there is a provision that comrades who wants to join politics must resign from their union position. And that the GTUC does not crave to establish political parties as we have done in Nigeria. And I know that you have varied experience across continents and across the different African countries. And you also know the failure of our attempt to organize politically. What would you recommend in terms of the best way for the working people to assert themselves within the political space? Is it within the context of establishing a political party, as we have tried to do with the Labour Party, or is it in the context of training cadre and equipping people ideologically to feature in established political parties? What would be the best model that you recommend? That's one. The second one is that I remember in 1998 at the Textile Workers Union Conference at the Airport Hotel, either Airport Hotel or somewhere in Ogba, that hotel owned by WAEC, you said something that's talking with me, that you said the greatest thing a leader can lose is the moral authority. And I kept that in my left palm. And I also want you to look at it within the context of leadership in your generation and context of leadership in our generation. How do you see the question of the moral authority within these generations? And how can we really uphold moral authority in leadership? Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Comrade Bello. Let me begin with the last one. That the worst thing to lose in life is moral authority. I still believe in it. And I told you at that conference, you remember, that the day a wife meets her husband with another woman on their married bed, that is the day, that's all. Even if the husband later asks for forgiveness from the wife, even if the wife forgives. But from that day on, to that woman, that husband has lost his moral authority over his wife. If it's the other way around, in fact, hardly can that man even take that woman back in his home as his wife. So that's why we have to jealously guard our actions in order not to lose our moral authority at home, in the community and in the society. So I still stick by that. You stick by that, people will respect you. Then your first question. You remind me of your first question?
It's about labor forming political parties, sir. I think you've covered that, but it's saying, how do we make it possible?
Look, see, every country has its own history. In Ghana, for example, there was a time the Ghana Trade Union Congress formed a party. And during that election, they won only one seat. And that seat was in Tamale. Not even in Accra and Tema, which are industrial areas that workers are so, so many there that if you have had about 4 or 5, only in Tamale that person won. So it's that experience that made Ghana TUC to say that they are not going to form any party, a political party, and anybody who wants to form a party or join the party should leave their TUC alone and go and form. In Nigeria too, Nigeria Labour Congress, at the time we started, in 1978, we also did the same thing that, look, any trade union leaders of the NLC that wanted to go to politics should ask for leave of absence and go and join politics of whatever party he wanted. But he should not drag the NLC or his branch into politics. So people like Comrade Olaniyan, he won at Ilobu, but he had to ask for leave of absence. A China embassy also asked for leave of absence before he won in the in Cross River State that time, and so on and so forth. But later, when things started to evolve, that time at the time NSC was founded, we didn't want the political leaders to cross the new NLC. That was why we wanted to dissociate ourselves from partisan politics, because that's the best way they would have used to destroy the fledgling NLC. For example, as early as 1979, when President Shagari came in, the NPN formed what they call a committee of their party, Labour Committee of NPN, with the sole purpose of destroying the Nigeria Labour Congress. But the funny thing about it was that anytime they held their meeting, we have minutes of the meeting of their and that's why we insisted that time that the Labour Minister that time, the late Honorable Adebisi Okwudegbe, that Shagari should remove him from Labour, and they had to send him to sponsor Labour Youth and Sports, because he was the one coordinating the destruction of Nigeria Labour Congress through that Labour Committee of the NPN. Those are the type of experiences that we had that made the NSC, until the NSC found his own feet, that we are not going to take part in partisan politics.
Thank you. And finally, Onoho Umen, the last person, I apologized for the people that we will not be able to take more questions to allow Alaji to rest. One last one, please.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me, sir.
Very well.
Yeah, I hear you.
We want to thank Professor Falola for the good work you have done for our people. I also want to congratulate you on your 73rd birthday. I understand that you are 73 now, and some events we organize in your honor. I was lucky to participate in your 70th birthday program at University of Jomo Kenyatta University in Nairobi. It is an honor to be able to engage Comrade Hassan Sunmonu on his 85th birthday. And he mentions one or two things that are of interest to me. First, he recognized that he was a mentee of Comrade Wahab Goodluck. Some of us met Goodluck in his later years. The last encounter I had with him was we were going abroad and security people came around to interrogate him at the airport. And he asked, "Oh, young man, we don't know what is going on here." But that's what raised my first question, sir. My first question is that the way Comrade Sunmonu has spoken, he still appears very strong, clear-headed. There is so much clarity of thoughts, ideas, and articulation. So I want to ask the first question, sir. If Comrade Sunmonu can do us the favor, continue the unfinished work of Comrade Wahab Goodluck by leading us to retrieve some of the democratic organizations that we seem to have lost to our class opponents. That's the first question I want to ask. The second question I would like to ask is a bit personal, and I hope he will take it with a gravity. I have come across a number of trade union leaders that are hostile to the idea of socialism, very hostile. And I ask myself, and I said often I get, how can you be in a trade union and you are not a socialist, even social democrat? I'm a bit worried about that, but I just want to also put this small question, sir. Can we make efforts to at least restore some element of class consciousness in our trade union movement, to respect simple process like we used to call democratic centralism? Will Comrade Sunmonu also be willing to help us to organize so that we do not agonize? Thank you so much, sir.
Why are you asking him to do that instead of asking a younger generation to do that? Why are you not asking a way to do that?
Look, I have no apologies to give to anybody for being a socialist. That's number one. Number two, there can be no Nigerian trade union leader who can say that, is not influenced or has influence of socialism in his blood, except perhaps he was born 100 years ago, and he died about 90 years ago. Because the lives of labor leader number one, Comrade Imodu, you have socialists, Wahab Goodluck, S.U. Bassi, and so on and so forth. The others who are not socialists, who are the USC, for example, like Alaji Tadba, Alaji Katungu, and so on and so forth. They were on the right, who are those others who are on the left, and it was eventually the left that eventually carried the day eventually. But let me make some correction to the earlier statement by Professor Falola. I was actually born with my twin brother in the Gold Coast, in a little village called Achimechie, in the Gold Coast, now Ghana. When they say, "Well, you're from Ghana," I said, "No, I was from Gold Coast." Of Oshobo parents. My mother, my dad are from Oshobo. And from the age of 7, we were brought home to Nigeria because my father didn't want us to grow up in in Ghana and Gold Coast because he feared we would never come back home. We had a number of relatives who were lost to the Gold Coast and Ghana now. And that was why at the age of 7, we were brought back to Osogbo, all these things we found in my book that will be launched exactly on my 85th birthday. That is next Wednesday, 7th of January, in Abuja. In Abuja, just about 3 days time in Abuja. All these things are contained in that, and all the struggles we had within the trade union movement that made, and from student unionism to trade unionism and so on and so forth, will be found there. And the struggles at the national level, at the continental level, at the international level, even the ILO, will be found in those books. And also some of the great leaders that I have the opportunity to have met one-on-one, like, Fidel Castro, Nelson Mandela, and Winnie Mandela, when they were alive, Robert Mugabe, Abdou Diouf of Senegal, Houphouët Boigny, the oldest president that time in Africa as well and so on, under my reminiscences. There are also Nigerian leaders that I've met from, General Babangida, General Obasanjo, and so on and so forth. General Abubakar Salam, they are also there my reminiscences, which I would find in that book. And also some of the struggles for economic integration and liberation within the Nigeria and the continent will also be found in the book. And I think people will find the book a bit interesting to read. So, Professor Falola, thanks so much for this opportunity to interact with your audience and the number of people who have been speaking this evening and also interviewing me. I thank all of you and wish everyone happy New Year and happy and prosperous New Year to each of us and also to our country, Nigeria, and the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. We will close shortly. I've read your book, Organize, Don't Agonize, and I've completed an advanced review, which I will release tomorrow, inshallah. So the purpose is to popularize the book and make the review accessible to a younger generation. Let's now make closing statements. Achike, can you give your closing statement, please? I cannot hear you, unfortunately. I can't hear you. Please.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please. Yes, sir.
Yes, it's been a wonderful deliberation. I appreciate the conversation from my colleagues on the other side, and then your interjection too, craftfully handled. Of course, you have the reputation for the celebrant, a great person, a great personality. He spoke in one thing I noticed about that. I think somebody talked about. When he talks, if you are not told about his age, you would be in doubt if somebody tells you that he's 85. His clarity of thought is excellent. His ability to remember is top notch. And then again, his ideological engagement, ideological compass is stimulating and encouraging. And a lot of us, I have learned a lot from this discussion. I also felt the vibrancy in his voice, his anger at the disappointment of the Nigerian state today, because obviously what we are witnessing and what he is witnessing is not something that they could anticipate, even as at the time they got into the, into the struggle. And so I wish him all the very best. Well, for some of us who are a bit younger, not so young, really, we will keep the torch, alight, the torch that he lit, he and his colleagues lit. We will do our best, and then the younger generation like Zikora and the rest also. He says that there is still hope, and I believe him. I believe him. So for as long as they say there is life, there is hope. And so we still believe, some of us still believe that we have what it takes to turn this country around. But just like he said, let's stop the agonizing, let's start the real organizing, and then hopefully we'll be able to bring our country out of the wood. This much this country that suffered and has been so much traumatized and abused. But we still believe that that this country still has what it takes that we have what it takes to take this country out of the woods. But we need to apply ourselves to it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of commitment. But we should not shy away from the work that needs to be done. I want to appreciate everybody, especially the great comrade himself. He's a source of inspiration. And some of us have been truly, truly inspired. Thank you, sir. And God bless you.
Okay, if you were to choose between Labor Union and going to APC, which would be your choice?
If I tell you APC here, if I tell you APC here, a lot of people, I'm not sure anybody there will believe me, because I think we have fought a lot of battles. A lot of the people that you see, over here that are even smiling, I can see them, great comrades, committed Nigerians, patriotic Nigerians. They will be sorely disappointed. The last thing that Achike Chude will do is to find himself in the company of the political sinners, those people who have brought us to where we are today. So I'm on the other side. I belong to the side of Comrade Hassan Sunmonu, and I think that is the winning side.
Away.
Yes, sir.
Would you agree with Achike that joining the labor union is better than joining a political party?
Well, both of them are organs of mobilization. So a political party necessarily does not need to be an APC or a PDP. It could also be a pro-people or left party. They are centers of agitation and mobilization. And that's why I have a lot of hope in the trade unions. And I tell our trade unionists, when I go for all these lectures, to say, look, some of the best labor laws in the world, are those of Nigeria. But we do not take advantage of them. I mean, for instance, the law says that if people belong to a trade union, automatically the employer is obliged to deduct salaries of his staff and pay the union. Under Goodluck and Co., you have to go to the gate of a factory if you want to collect union dues and convince them that they should pay. So we have some of those, the labor unions. Our constitution, for instance, says that all Nigerians have a right to belong to organizations, including trade unions, to form trade unions. It's automatic. But fortunately, most of our workers are not organized. And that is the challenge of trade unions. For instance, and I'm happy that the president of ASU is here, and he's been raised a number of times. ASU is one of the best organized unions in the country, to the extent that it can ballot before it goes on strike. But I do not know of the universities in Nigeria, private universities, any of them that has a union. So we have a duty to assist unions like ASU to break through. In other words, one of the major challenges we have in Nigeria, in trade unions in Nigeria, is about organizing. We are not paying much attention to organizing. We are not spending money on organizing, and we are not spending much time and resources on mass education. I remember that, for instance, because I, you know, Alhaji Sunmonu was my father, or is my father in trade unionism, and Wahab Goodluck, my grandfather. And I know in the days of Wahab Goodluck, and later Alhaji Sunmonu, when he became NSC president, there used to be monthly meetings of workers in Lagos, so that they come with their problems, you accept what to do, and then you go out and try to implement. All these things are missing now. In fact, there are trade unionists who do not want their workers to be close to their workers. There are workers in this country, you can ask who the president or the general secretary is, and they will not know. So we have a lot of challenges, but we also have a lot of advantages, especially in this age of the internet, where you can, in those days, when we were under Alhaji Sunmonu, you want to do anything in Nigeria, you have to move. You print the pamphlets and leaflets and cardboard somewhere, and then you move across. You are going to Kaduna, you are going to Kano, you are going to Maiduguri, you move with night bus. Now, you can put everything together. In 1 minute, everybody gets information. But we are not taking advantage of those things. And those are some of the problems we have. Let me say I'm one of the happiest persons about this book launch Alhaji is going to have. For about 15 years, I'd been on Alhaji's neck that this book must be produced. And I was very happy when he told me 1 or 2 years ago that the book was ready. But then there was a question about the publisher. So we are quite happy. It's a treasure book. It's a treasure for all of us. It's a legacy that we have from Alhaji Sunmonu. Unfortunately, most of our past labor leaders never wrote anything. Just a few weeks ago, we went to Lagos to organize something for Pa Michael Imodu, the 20th commemoration of his death. So people like Imodu, good enough, there are 1 or 2 books about him now. People like Goodluck, I'm not sure has any book anyway. Yet his materials and, could be found in those days, I don't know whether they are still available, with his union, the amalgamated union. So virtually all our labor leaders in the 40s and 50s up to the last few years did not have books. You just have a handful. So Alhaji Sunmonu has shown the way, and he has done that for us in a very wonderful way. And that is why people like us are very happy that we have something we can rely on. And the hope is that for the rest of us also, we can sit down and write those things. For instance, there is not a single book that I know about the history of trade unionism in Nigeria. There's none. The only person who came very close wrote about the trade unions from about 1912 to 1966, which was Uogo and Anaba. And part of the problem we have is that people do not invest in such things. There is no university or school you can go to and say, look, I want to write a book on Nigerian labor history, and you get anything. And so in this whole process of people trying to make ends meet, they will hardly have time for that. And at the end of the day, we continue to lose generation after generation. And I think Alhaji Sunmonu has done very well. And I want to thank you, sir, for what you have done for all of us. Thank you very much.
Sikora, let me ask you a question to make your closing statement. Suppose you are given a choice, fight for the demolition of patriarchy or fight for democracy. Which one will you choose? She's frozen.
I think that, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Well, I think that I've always had a response to this sort of questions. But let me first of all say clearly that I do not support patriarchy. But then my response has always been that sometimes humans ideals start off good, but then humans also derail ideals. So because if you talk to some people, they will tell you patriarchy has its benefits, and then patriarchy doesn't have its benefit. Oh, we have also discussed earlier the benefits of democracy. What cost has come with democracy? Has it crushed the will of people? Has it lived up to its true test? Has it benefited people ultimately? So that at the end of the day, what you're looking at is the human factor. Who are the humans in control? What are the values that are dominant? And so how does it shape the reality of our time? So I can't really say for sure if I would say demolish patriarchy or demolish democracy, but I would tell you that we need to build a society where humans understand that we are the architects of the good, the bad, everything that happens to us. And we need to build a society that is, strongly rooted in value go forward. And that's what I would say, really, if you ask me. And so to my closing thoughts, I want to thank you so much, Prof. Falola. I'm Igbo, forgive me. I am mixing up your name.
But you are correct. You pronounced my name correctly.
I pronounced it correctly. So thank you so much for this platform and for the opportunity. And I want to say that it has been an honor to have a conversation with the living ancestor himself. And some of his perspectives has, just offered lessons for me, and I'm sure for everybody. I think one very critical thing I've taken from him conversation is the part where he was answering to a question, and then he said that a trade unionist must be a populist in the sense that he or she must have the interest of their members at heart. So it doesn't matter if that person is a Marxist, a socialist, or whatever the person must first have the interest of their members at heart. And I take this as an important point because what I've also observed and noticed, especially for organizing within the left movement in Nigeria, is that there's so much rancor in terms of approaches, strategies, ideological differences. So sometimes people call a meeting and they spend the first 1 hour or 2 hours defending their ideological approach or why the approach should be this or the purity of their strategy. And so that at the end of the day, we lose sight of what the bigger picture is, and which is that we have common enemies, we have shared priorities, we have the bigger picture, which is to defend the people, to defend the rights of people to exist and to demand accountability from power structures like governments and corporations. So in truth, we must understand that the bigger picture, the greater goal is that we are all defenders of people's interests. We have to defend the interests of our constituents. And so that is what we put at the center before thinking of every other thing that divides us or all our differences. So the differences don't matter unless when we're looking at the bigger picture, the differences should just make us stronger in terms of our approaches, really. And so I want to say thank you to him. And also, he also answered the hard question, which you posed earlier. And that question is the struggle worth it? Well, if we're going to look at the life of Comrade Hassan, his discipline, his clarity, even up to this moment, as many of us has confirmed that his voice, his voice disguises his age. So if you look at his life so far, his lessons, the lessons that he has put forward, perhaps we can say that it is worth it. The struggle is worth it as long as we have faith in our organizing, in our discipline, and in our ability to move forward the kind of ethos that we want in society. So I say thank you to him for this opportunity to have this conversation, and to the Falola crew for putting up this platform. I consider it as a legacy interview, and I'm ultimately grateful even to the viewers that joined in. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I don't think Professor Lainka is around. Or are you around, sir?
I'm around, sir. Only that if you can help me put my video on.
Okay. Our technical people, can you put?
Okay, it's on now.
So, how will you react to my suggestion that we create technical schools, the trade centers of the past, and that we should put a lot of emphasis on that. That the obsession, I know you're a former vice chancellor, with universities, is it being misplaced, exaggerated, or are trade schools not better?
Okay, thank you, sir. Well, I think everything has to be put in the proper perspective. I mean, you are right. I think the technical schools, there should be a role for them. And I think there was a report about 2-3 years ago whereby China was trying to convert many of their universities into technical colleges because they think that was going to be the emphasis. And it's not just going to be theoretical knowledge from the universities alone that will be in the longer interest of their country. So they were placing, or they still place much emphasis on technical education. And I think about 3 nights ago, I listened to the Honorable Minister of Education, whereby he was emphasizing the efforts, hammering on the efforts being made by the Federal Ministry of Education in terms of technical education, that students can then come in, they don't have to pay any fees. If anything, government will be paying them some stipend at the end of every month, just to encourage them. I think, but maybe the psychology of the typical 17, 18-year-old in Nigeria is to enter the university. I mean, there was time I was in Germany. The apartment I was staying in Berlin had a technical fault. So I called the technician to come and help me fix it. So we agreed on the particular time for him to come and fix it for me. But I failed the appointment because I was delayed in my institute. So I was late by about 5 minutes. He had left. So to me, that was dignity of labor. He felt that if we had an appointment to come and help me fix something in my apartment, and I failed in coming, then he could not wait for me endlessly. So I was really very impressed that he valued his job. Because to me, at the end of the day, what is important for every young folk is to earn a decent living. It wouldn't make any difference whether you are working at the factory, at a factory, or you are a professor in the university. But I think maybe we have placed too much emphasis on university education. But again, you then find out that it's like the children of the elite will go to the universities. The children of those who are less privileged in the society, you send them to technical schools. So it's a bit ideological to some extent. I mean, that's the way the people will look at it. That you send your own children to some of the topmost universities in Nigeria and outside. Why are you asking the children of the downtrodden to go to technical schools? But of course, people also, in fact, the Minister of Education was saying that even university graduates have been encouraged to even go into technical education, I mean, after their degree. You have found your degree. I mean, now they introduce programs on entrepreneurship and the rest of it, just to add on. It doesn't really matter whether you read communication and language arts or you read geology, you can still have some technical expertise. And now in these days of IT, I mean, irrespective of my own personal preference, but I think because, like I mentioned, I think Baba Comrade Sunmonu in his intro, when you were reading his intro, you also mentioned the fact that Yaba College of Technology, which was established about 1932, is being converted into university. And so whether we like it or not, it's sending the wrong signal. It's like going to be polytechnic should not be the terminal level of education. So the polytechnics are being converted into universities. I think that is a trend. When you even look at statistics published annually by JAMB, 96% of candidates applying for university, only a very small percentage applying for technical schools or technically oriented institutions. I mean, so I think it creates a challenge. Even those who are in polytechnics, they also still want to cross to university at the end of the day. In fact, most of those polytechnics, most of them are not even offering core technical courses. They are doing business studies. So it's a very complex, complicated situation. But again, I mean, people also talk. In fact, the minister alluded to the fact that the technicians, those who are tilers and all those things, we import them from the Republic, from Togo. Our people don't want to do that. Rather, they be Okada riders. I mean, in spite of all the risk. So I think these are just my comments. But since you're asking us to make our maybe general comments or to round off, the point I just want to allude to, which is not a question now, is just to say that everywhere we find ourselves, we should try to make a difference. Because people in government, nobody was born to be in government. I mean, they are coming from the same ecosystem as the rest of us. Like every now and then, I'm aware that it was the former ASU chairman, Professor Jega, when he was a chairman of INEC, who introduced the idea of your university staff serving as ad hoc staff of INEC. It pains me. People will say university professors, vice chancellor, they go and rig election for politicians. I have had cause to serve as ad hoc staff for INEC on 4 different occasions: presidential election of 2019, then 3 governorship elections, Ondo, Ekiti, and I think Ogun, because of this off-season election. I was never found guilty of anything. If anything, the Council of our University commended me. So if 1 out of 50 or so vice chancellors couldn't read the figures on national television, you cannot generalize university professors. The career that you have taken, you have spent 30 years, 40 years to build, that the politicians want to use you as a cannon fodder. So I think we should. I mean, it's not so much about me, but that anywhere we find ourselves, we should try to make a difference. And of course, if somebody has flouted the law of the land, he or she should be handled appropriately. And the point I'm trying to make is that those who are professional politicians, insofar as they have failed us, they didn't come from outer space. They are also from our villages, our communities. But on the other hand, each and every one of us, Professor, the man who was in MAMSA before, the professor, we say that if you are a teacher, teach very well. If you are a banker, bank very well. All of us, Jerry Gardner, Professor Jerry Gardner, when he was in MAMSA, everywhere we find ourselves, by providence, we should make a little difference. Even if to teach students in the primary school, that is our calling. We should do it very well, not half-heartedly, and say the politicians on the other side. Thank you, sir, for the privilege and the opportunity extended to me.
Well, I'm really, really very grateful to all of you. Grateful to the Dean of Social Sciences, University of Lagos, Professor Adela Yaudukoya, who recommended this entire panel to me in terms of choices. I've known Baba Sunmonu, I've known Professor Loyinka away. I'm meeting for the first time Sikora and Achike, and I hope our friendship will continue. On February 8th, we are discussing Nigeria in 2026, scenarios and projections. We already have our team. And on February 15, we're having a panel discussion on the escalating use of drugs in Africa. Please join us on February 8th, February 15. We continue to do this as our small contribution to the development of the continent, taking knowledge to the streets, combining the academic with the public, and creating synergy. So what follows? In 2 minutes, we will release the entire transcript to the public in 2 minutes. I will write my own comments on what you have said. We'll do segments of what you have said, post them on YouTube. And I do not know what the newspapers will say. They have their own take. They have their own emphasis. And I look forward to what the newspapers will say starting from Tuesday. Well, I will release to members of the panel the music we have created for you so that you can keep them. And as soon as you depart, we'll play some music for a few more minutes. I'm very, very grateful, extremely grateful. And I wish Baba Hassan Sunmonu a great outing on January 7. And I hope my review will not disappoint you. Thank you very much. And bye-bye now.
Thank you, sir.